Before we go anywhere at all, let's make sure you're comfortable. You don't need to sit up straight and you don't need to take notes. You don't even need to keep your eyes open. If you're lying down already, that's good. If you're not, maybe find a way to rest a little more. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. Let your hands go loose wherever they happen to be. The light can be low. The sound can be low. You don't have to pay close attention to any of this, because this is not the kind of thing that needs to be remembered by morning. It's more like a long, slow walk through a familiar landscape, except the landscape happens to be inside you. Before we start, one small thing. This is a calm walk through a subject, made for rest and for gentle learning. It isn't professional advice of any kind, medical or otherwise, so please don't lean on it for anything that matters. And please don't listen to this while you're driving or while you're doing anything that needs your attention. Find somewhere safe, somewhere you can stop moving for a while. If you'd like to come back to any of this while you're awake, the No Fluff Anatomy and Physiology Guide is at the link in the description, and it covers the same ground in a form you can actually read. But you don't need it tonight. Tonight, you can just listen. Now, let's think about food for a moment. Not because you need to eat anything right now, but because food is where the story of the digestive system begins. Imagine you're holding a piece of bread, or an apple, or a spoonful of rice. It's a thing from the outside world. It is not you. It has its own shape, its own texture, its own little arrangement of molecules that hold it together. But the moment you put it in your mouth and chew it and swallow it, it begins a long journey through a tube that runs from your lips all the way down through your body and out the other side. That tube is the digestive tract. It's one continuous passage, like a hallway that winds through a building, with doors opening off it into different rooms. The doors are the glands and organs that help along the way, and the hallway itself is where the food travels. If you follow that hallway from top to bottom, you pass through the mouth, the throat, the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, and then out. That's the basic map. One tube from one end to the other. But before the tube can do anything useful, we have to understand what the body is made of, because the digestive system is built from the same materials as everything else in you, and the way those materials fit together is one of the simplest, most repeated ideas in all of anatomy and physiology. The body is organized in layers, like nesting dolls. The smallest living layer is the cell. A cell is a tiny, soft, living bag of fluid with its own little set of instructions inside. It's small enough that you can't see one with your eyes alone, but it's the basic unit of every living thing. You are made of trillions of them. Trillions. So many that if you started counting them one per second, you would still be counting long after the stars had shifted in the sky. When a group of similar cells all sit together and do the same kind of job, we call that a tissue. Think of a tissue like a fabric. A single thread does very little by itself, but weave thousands of threads together and you get a cloth. That cloth can cover things, or hold things, or stretch, or soak up water, depending on how it's made. Tissues in the body work the same way. The lining of your stomach is a tissue. The surface of your tongue is a tissue. The inside of your cheek is a tissue. Each one is a sheet made of many cells doing the same quiet work. When two or more tissues sit together and form a structure with a particular shape and a particular job, that's an organ. The stomach is an organ, the liver is an organ, the tongue is an organ too, and so is the esophagus. Each organ has layers of different tissues arranged in a particular way, like the walls of a house with wood and insulation and plaster all layered together. The wall has a job, and all the layers contribute to that job in their own way. And when several organs work together to do a bigger job, we call that a system. The digestive system is exactly that. It's a group of organs, made of tissues, made of cells, all working in a coordinated way to do one big task. The task is to take food from the outside world, break it down into pieces small enough to move through the walls of that long tube, and then bring those pieces into the blood so the rest of the body can use them. That's all digestion really is, when you stand far enough back. It's a way of turning an apple into you. Now, to understand how food becomes you, it helps to think about what food is made of in the first place. Most of the food we eat is built from a small number of ingredients. There are carbohydrates, which are the starchy and sugary things, like bread and rice and fruit. There are proteins, which are the building blocks of meat and beans and eggs. There are fats, which are the rich and oily things, like butter and oil and the fat in nuts. And there are vitamins and minerals and water, which don't give the body energy in the same way, but are still needed for all the little jobs the body does. Now here's the important part. Your body can't use carbohydrates, proteins, or fats in their original, whole form. They're too big. They're like furniture that won't fit through a doorway. The doorway is the wall of the intestine, and the furniture is the food. So digestion is the process of taking the furniture apart, piece by piece, until every part is small enough to pass through the door. The body has special tools for this taking apart work. Some of those tools are mechanical, like chewing and grinding and churning. Some of those tools are chemical, like the juices that dissolve and snip and pull the pieces apart. But the goal is always the same. Take the big thing and make it small. Take the outside thing and make it inside. And this is a good moment to just sit with that idea, because it sits underneath everything else we'll talk about. The body is organized in layers. Cells make tissues. Tissues make organs. Organs make systems. And one of those systems, the digestive system, is a long tube that takes in the outside world, breaks it into pieces small enough to pass through a wall, and then uses those pieces to build and repair and run every other part of you. That's a quiet, beautiful, patient kind of work. It happens all day and all night, without you telling it to, without you even noticing it most of the time. While you lie here, somewhere deep in your abdomen, a soft length of tissue is slowly, gently pushing a little material forward, a few centimeters at a time, and it will keep doing that whether you remember any of this or not. Let's begin the journey at the very beginning, at the mouth. The mouth is not just an opening, it's a whole chamber, lined with a tissue called mucosa. That's a word worth knowing. A mucosa is a moist lining that covers the inside of any passage that opens to the outside world. The mouth opens to the outside world, so it's lined with mucosa. The nose is lined with mucosa. The digestive tract from one end to the other is lined with mucosa. It's the inner skin of the body's hallways. In the mouth, this mucosa is kept wet by saliva. Saliva is a watery fluid made by glands that sit around the mouth, under the tongue, under the jaw, in the cheeks. It's mostly water, but it also has a few quiet ingredients in it that start the work of digestion even before you've swallowed. The first thing that happens when food enters the mouth is that you bite and chew. Your teeth are hard, bone-like structures planted in the jaw. They don't get replaced, so they're built to last. The front teeth, the incisors, are shaped like little shovels or chisels, and they cut. The pointed teeth next to them, the canines, are for gripping and tearing. The flat teeth at the back, the premolars and molars, are for grinding. They crush the food into smaller and smaller pieces, the way a mortar and pestle grinds seeds. And all the while, the tongue moves the food around, pushing it under the teeth, pulling it back, mixing it with saliva. Saliva does more than just wet the food so it's easier to swallow. It also contains an enzyme, and an enzyme is a kind of chemical helper that speeds up a very particular job. The enzyme in saliva is called amylase. Amylase starts working on starches right there in the mouth. Starches are long chains of sugar molecules, thousands of them linked together. Amylase snips those chains into smaller pieces, into sugars and smaller chains that are sweeter and easier to handle later on. This is why a piece of plain bread, if you hold it in your mouth long enough and keep chewing, begins to taste a little bit sweet. The starch is being cut into sugar, and you can taste the change happening. But the mouth isn't just for chewing and starting digestion. It's also where the decision to swallow happens, and that decision is not something you think about much. It's coordinated by a part of the brain that handles automatic actions, the things the body does without your deliberate instruction. When the food has been chewed enough, the tongue rolls it back toward the throat, and the swallow begins. This is where the food leaves the mouth and enters the pharynx, the throat. The pharynx is a shared hallway. It's used by both the digestive system and the respiratory system. Food goes through it, and air goes through it. To keep things from going down the wrong way, a little flap of tissue called the epiglottis tilts down over the opening to the windpipe when you swallow. It's like a leaf falling over a doorway. It doesn't have to think, it just tips. The food slides past, over the closed door, and into the esophagus. The esophagus is a muscular tube that runs down the chest, behind the heart and in front of the spine. It's not wide, only about 2 centimeters across in most places, but it's stretchy. Its job is simple. It moves food from the throat to the stomach. It does this not by gravity, not because the food falls, but because the walls of the esophagus squeeze behind the food and push it along. This squeezing movement is called peristalsis. Peristalsis is a wave. It's the same kind of wave you see in the body of a caterpillar as it inches along a leaf. A ring of muscle tightens behind the food, then the next ring tightens, then the next, and so on, pushing the food forward in a slow, steady progression. Peristalsis happens all along the digestive tract, from the esophagus to the very end. It's one of the most basic rhythms of the body, a soft, muscular wave that never really stops. And this is where the food is now. It has been bitten, chewed, wet with saliva, rolled into a soft ball, and pushed down a tube by waves of muscle. And just ahead of it, at the bottom of that tube, there's a doorway. It's not a big dramatic door. It's a ring of muscle called the lower esophageal sphincter. A sphincter is a circular muscle that closes an opening, like a drawstring. This particular one sits between the esophagus and the stomach. When it's closed, it keeps the stomach's contents from flowing back up into the esophagus. When a wave of peristalsis reaches it, it relaxes, opens just enough, lets the food through, and then closes again. The food has now entered the stomach. Let's take a breath here, because the food is just inside the stomach, but the stomach itself deserves a calm and careful look. The stomach is a muscular bag. It sits in the upper left part of the abdomen, tucked under the ribs. When it's empty, it's not much bigger than a fist, but it can stretch to hold a good deal more. The inside of the stomach is lined with a mucosa, just like the mouth. But this mucosa is different. It's folded into long, soft ridges, and it's dotted with millions of tiny pits. At the bottom of those pits are glands, and those glands make gastric juice. Gastric juice is a mixture of water, acid, and enzymes. The acid is hydrochloric acid, the same kind of acid used in industry to clean metal, but much, much weaker in the stomach. It's strong enough, though, to kill many of the microbes that ride in with the food. And it's strong enough to loosen the structure of proteins, to unwind them, to make them easier for the enzymes to cut. One of those enzymes is called pepsin. Pepsin is a protein-snipping enzyme. It works best in an acid environment, which is why the stomach is acid. The two work together, the acid and the enzyme, to begin the long process of breaking proteins down into their building blocks. The stomach is also a churner. Its walls are made of 3 layers of smooth muscle, arranged in different directions, so it can squeeze and knead and tumble its contents the way hands knead dough. Every wave of muscle churns the food and mixes it with the gastric juice. Over the course of a few hours, the food is turned into a thick, soupy liquid called chyme. Chyme is not yet usable by the body. It's just broken down enough to be passed along to the next organ, where the real work of absorption will happen. But before that, let's rest in the idea of the stomach for a little longer, because it's a fine example of an organ doing exactly what it's built to do. It doesn't rush, it doesn't panic, it takes whatever you give it, and it works on it, slowly, rhythmically, until the work is done. You don't need to remember any of this. That's not the point of lying here listening. The point is just to notice, in a soft way, that this is happening inside you right now, or something very like it. There is a long tube running through you, lined with a moist inner skin, moved by gentle waves of muscle, dotted with doorways that open and close. And at this moment, somewhere in that tube, a little bit of material is being moved a little further along. It's a quiet, patient process. It was happening before you started listening, and it will keep happening after you fall asleep. It's one of the oldest arrangements in the animal world, and it works almost silently. Let's settle further into the stomach's slow work. When the food first arrives, the upper part of the stomach relaxes to make room. This is called receptive relaxation. It's the body's way of saying, there is space here, you don't need to tighten. The lower part of the stomach then begins its waves, starting near the middle and moving down toward the exit. These waves happen about 3 times a minute. They're not violent. They're more like the slow ripple of water in a basin when a boat passes far away. Each wave pushes a little of the liquid chyme toward the pyloric sphincter, the doorway at the far end of the stomach. That sphincter only opens a small amount at a time, letting through a few milliliters of chyme with each wave. A few milliliters is not much, it's about a teaspoon, so the stomach is careful. It releases its contents slowly, bit by bit, into the small intestine, which is the next part of the tube. It does this so the intestine is not overwhelmed. The intestine has work to do, and it likes to do that work in small, manageable amounts. The small intestine is not actually small in length. It's about 6 meters long, which is roughly the length of a car. It's called small because it's narrow compared to the large intestine. It's coiled up in the middle of the abdomen, held in place by thin sheets of tissue. The small intestine is where most of digestion is finished, and where most of absorption happens. If the stomach is the kitchen where food is first prepared, the small intestine is the dining room and the pantry combined. It's where the food is finally taken apart into molecules small enough to cross the wall and enter the blood. The inside of the small intestine is not smooth. If you could look at it closely, you'd see that its lining is folded, and on those folds are tiny finger-like projections, and on those projections are even tinier projections, like a coastline seen from very far away, then closer still. These little fingers are called villi, and the even tinier ones are called microvilli. Together they create an enormous surface area. All those folds and fingers mean that the inside of the small intestine, if laid out flat, would cover an area about the size of a tennis court. That's the trick of absorption. The body makes a small space very large by wrinkling it up. It's the same trick a towel uses. A flat towel dries a small amount. A folded towel, with all its loops and bumps, has far more surface for water to cling to. The intestine is a folded towel on a grand scale, and every fold is there to catch the small pieces of food. But before the food can be absorbed, it has to be finished. And this finishing work is done with the help of 2 large organs that aren't part of the tube itself, but send their juices into it. One is the liver, and the other is the pancreas. The liver is a large, soft, reddish-brown organ that sits just under the ribs on the right side. It does hundreds of jobs, but for digestion it makes bile. Bile is a greenish fluid that helps with fats. Fats are tricky because they don't mix with water, and the digestive tract is a watery place. If you pour oil into water, it floats in droplets and refuses to blend. Bile solves this by acting like a kind of bridge. It breaks the fat into tiny droplets that can stay suspended in water, giving the fat-digesting enzymes a much larger area to work on. The liver makes the bile, and the bile is stored in a small pouch under the liver called the gallbladder. When fatty food arrives in the small intestine, the gallbladder squeezes a little bile out, and the fat becomes manageable. The pancreas is a long, soft gland that sits behind the stomach. It makes pancreatic juice, which is full of enzymes. These enzymes are like a team of specialists. One breaks down starches, one breaks down proteins, one breaks down fats. They're released into the small intestine through a small opening shared with the bile duct. The pancreas also has another role, which is to make insulin and other hormones that help control the amount of sugar in the blood. But for now, in the context of digestion, the pancreas is the quiet chemist that finishes the work the mouth and stomach started. It snips the last big molecules into their smallest pieces. Starches become simple sugars, proteins become amino acids, fats become fatty acids and glycerol. These are the small pieces that can pass through the wall. This is the moment where the outside world becomes the inside world. The simple sugars, the amino acids, the fatty acids, they all cross the lining of the small intestine and enter either the blood or the lymph. The blood goes first to the liver, which checks what has arrived and parcels it out to the rest of the body. Some is stored, some is sent to the muscles, some is used right away to keep the heart beating and the lungs breathing. This is how an apple becomes you, not in a magical or mysterious way, but in a long, slow chemical and physical process that runs on folds and waves and tiny molecular scissors. But the story doesn't end there, because not everything in food can be absorbed. Some of it is left behind. Fiber, for instance, is the part of plants that the body can't break down. It travels through the small intestine, mostly unchanged, along with water and some salts and other leftovers. These materials move into the large intestine, also called the colon. The large intestine is wider than the small intestine and much shorter, only about 1.5 meters long. It forms a kind of frame around the edges of the abdomen. Its job is not to digest, but to reclaim water and to house a huge community of bacteria. These bacteria are not invaders, they're residents. They live in the large intestine in enormous numbers, and they help break down some of the fiber that our own enzymes can't handle. In doing so, they make vitamins and other small useful molecules that the body absorbs. They also make gas, which is a normal and harmless byproduct. As the remaining material moves through the large intestine, water is absorbed back into the body, and the material becomes more solid. The waves of peristalsis here are slower, more deliberate. This is where the body takes its time. The material may spend a day or more moving through the colon, slowly losing water, slowly becoming the stool that is eventually stored in the last part of the large intestine, the rectum, until it leaves the body through the anus. That's the end of the tube. It's not glamorous, but it's necessary. The body takes what it needs and lets go of what it doesn't. And all of this, from the first bite to the last, is the digestive system. It's a long tube with a few side rooms and many layers. It's lined with mucosa. It's moved by muscle. It's helped by glands and enzymes and bacteria. It takes food, which is the outside world, and turns it into the raw material of a person. And it does all of this without you having to tell it to. The brain does send some signals, and hormones carry messages, but most of the process runs itself. The stomach knows how to churn. The intestine knows how to absorb. The liver knows how to sort. The colon knows how to wait. It's a long, quiet, coordinated effort, happening in the dark, under the ribs, below the diaphragm, all day and all night. As we drift a little further, it's worth noting that the digestive system doesn't work alone. It's one system among many. The blood that carries absorbed nutrients is part of the cardiovascular system. The hormones that signal the stomach and pancreas are part of the endocrine system. The nerves that trigger peristalsis are part of the nervous system. The body is not a collection of separate machines. It's a single, nested whole. Cells make tissues. Tissues make organs. Organs make systems. And systems work together to make a body. The digestive system is just one thread in a fabric. But it's a thread that touches every other thread, because every cell in the body depends on what the digestive system brings in. Without it, there is no fuel. Without it, there are no building blocks. Without it, the whole quiet arrangement slowly winds down. So the digestive system is not just a tube. It's the supply line. It's the port where the outside world enters the inside world, where an apple becomes a thought, a breath, a heartbeat, a dream. Let's go back just for a moment to the idea of layers, because it's the foundation of everything we've touched on. Every part of the digestive tract, from the mouth to the colon, is built from the same general layers. The innermost layer is the mucosa, the moist lining that faces the food. Outside that is a layer of connective tissue, which holds blood vessels and nerves and glands. Outside that is a layer of smooth muscle, usually arranged in two directions, circular and longitudinal, so the tube can squeeze in and out and make waves. And outside that, in many places, is a thin outer covering. These layers are the same in the esophagus and the stomach, and the small intestine and the large intestine, with local differences. The stomach has an extra layer of muscle for churning. The small intestine has villi for absorption. The large intestine has a different arrangement of muscle and a different community of residents. But the plan is the same. A tube inside a tube, with a wall that protects and moves and absorbs. It's a beautiful piece of quiet engineering, and it's built from cells that know how to become tissues, that know how to become organs, that know how to work together. And you don't have to direct any of it. Now you don't need to remember the names. You don't need to remember the enzymes or the villi or the sphincters. You can let all of that go. What's left is a simple picture. Food enters a long tube. The tube moves it along with gentle waves. Juices break it down. Folds absorb the small pieces. The blood carries them to the body. What's left is let go. That's the whole story, and it's happening inside you right now, in the dark, in the quiet, under the soft rise and fall of your breath. As the next part of this series begins, we'll move a little further into the body, into the systems that carry what the digestive tract absorbs, and into the ways the body keeps itself balanced and whole. But there's no need to rush toward that. There's no need to do anything at all right now. The food, if there is any, is moving along at its own pace. The stomach is resting between waves. The intestine is absorbing what it can. The blood is moving quietly through the liver. And the whole arrangement is working, softly, patiently, while you listen, while you drift, while you let the words blur into the background like rain on a roof. Let the next part come when it comes. For now, the body is enough. The tube is enough. The wave is enough. Sleep can come whenever it likes. The esophagus carries food down through the chest, and just before it reaches the stomach, it passes through a small opening in the diaphragm. The diaphragm is a dome-shaped sheet of muscle that sits under the lungs and above the abdomen. It's the main muscle of breathing, but it also has a small opening, called the esophageal hiatus, through which the esophagus passes. This is one of those quiet details that shows how the body is arranged, with one system passing through another, each one making room for the others. The diaphragm flattens when you breathe in, and it relaxes back into a dome when you breathe out, and all the while, the esophagus passes through it, carrying food in the opposite direction of breath. When the food arrives at the lower esophageal sphincter and slips through into the stomach, it enters a different kind of environment. The stomach is not just a passive bag, it's an active, muscular chamber with its own rhythm and its own chemistry. The stomach has four main regions. The first is the cardia, which is the small area right around the opening where the esophagus meets the stomach. The second is the fundus, which is the upper rounded part that sits above the level of that opening. The third is the body, which is the large central portion, and the fourth is the pyloric part, which narrows toward the exit and leads to the pyloric sphincter. Each region has a slightly different job, but together they store, mix, and empty the food. The lining of the stomach is not smooth like the inside of a balloon. It's folded into long, soft ridges called rugae. These folds allow the stomach to expand when food arrives and to shrink back when it's empty. They're like the pleats in a skirt or the accordion folds in a paper lantern. When the stomach is empty, the folds are deep and the inside is small. When food enters, the folds flatten out and the stomach stretches. This stretching is not just a mechanical change. It sends signals to the brain and to the stomach's own nervous system. Signals that say, "There is food here. Begin the work." The stomach starts to secrete more gastric juice, and the waves of muscle start to churn. Gastric juice is made by millions of tiny glands that sit in the stomach lining. Some of these glands make mucus, which coats the inside of the stomach and protects it from the acid. Some make hydrochloric acid, which gives the stomach its low pH. Some make pepsinogen, which is the inactive form of pepsin. Pepsinogen waits until it meets the acid, and then it turns into pepsin, the active protein snipping enzyme. Some glands also make a substance called intrinsic factor, which the body needs to absorb vitamin B12 later on in the small intestine. So the stomach is not just a pool of acid. It's a carefully balanced chemical workshop, where each secretion has a purpose and the timing is coordinated. The acid in the stomach does several things. It kills many of the bacteria that come in with food, which is a first line of defense. It uncoils proteins, a process called denaturation. When a protein is denatured, it loses its tight, folded shape and becomes a loose, open strand. This makes it much easier for pepsin to cut into pieces. The acid also activates pepsin from its inactive form. So the acid is not just there to be harsh. It's there to prepare the food for the enzymes, to make the environment right for the work. The muscle of the stomach is arranged in 3 layers instead of the 2 layers found in most of the rest of the digestive tract. There's a circular layer, which wraps around the stomach. There's a longitudinal layer, which runs along the length of the stomach, and there's an oblique layer, which runs at an angle. This 3rd layer gives the stomach its special churning ability. The 3 layers work together to squeeze and twist and knead the food, the way hands work dough in a deep bowl. The food is turned over and over, mixed with the gastric juice, and slowly broken into smaller and smaller pieces. This is mechanical digestion and chemical digestion happening at the same time, in the same organ. The rate at which the stomach empties depends on what's in the food. Carbohydrates leave the stomach relatively quickly. Proteins take a little longer. Fats take the longest, because fat in the small intestine triggers hormones that slow down the stomach. This is one of the reasons a meal with fat feels satisfying and keeps you full for a while. The body is not in a hurry. It releases food into the small intestine at a rate the intestine can handle. If you eat a large, fatty meal, the stomach will hold on to it longer, releasing it slowly over many hours. If you eat a small meal of simple carbohydrates, it may pass through more quickly. The stomach is not a timer. It's a gatekeeper, and it responds to the content of what it holds. The pyloric sphincter is the gatekeeper's door. It's a ring of thickened muscle at the far end of the stomach. It opens just enough to let a small amount of chyme pass through with each wave of peristalsis. When the chyme enters the first part of the small intestine, called the duodenum, it triggers signals that slow the stomach down. This is a feedback loop. The intestine says, "I have enough for now, wait a little," and the stomach waits. This is how the body coordinates a long tube without a central conductor. Each part talks to the next part through hormones and nerves, and the whole thing adjusts itself moment by moment. Now, the small intestine has 3 parts. The first and shortest is the duodenum, only about 25 centimeters long. The duodenum is where the bile and the pancreatic juice enter the tube. The second part is the jejunum, about 2.5 meters long, where a great deal of absorption happens. The third part is the ileum, about 3.5 meters long, which also absorbs nutrients and has special patches of tissue that help the immune system. The wall of the small intestine is folded and covered with villi and microvilli, as we touched on before. But let's go a little deeper into how absorption actually works. The small pieces of food, the simple sugars, the amino acids, the fatty acids, they have to cross the wall of the intestine. This wall is only 1 cell thick in most places. That's very thin, thin enough for small molecules to pass through with the help of special carriers. The cells that line the intestine are called enterocytes. They have little brushes of microvilli on their top surface, and they have channels and carriers and pumps built into their membranes. These carriers grab specific molecules and move them from the inside of the intestine into the cell, and then from the cell into the blood or the lymph on the other side. This is not a passive process. The body uses energy to move many of these molecules, especially glucose and amino acids. It's an active, carefully controlled transport system. Water follows the nutrients by osmosis, which is a simple physical process where water moves toward areas with more dissolved particles. So as the intestine absorbs salts and sugars, water follows along. This is one of the ways the body reclaims the water it uses in digestion. The digestive tract secretes a lot of fluid, several liters a day, in the form of saliva, gastric juice, bile, and pancreatic juice. Almost all of that fluid is reabsorbed in the small intestine and the large intestine. If it weren't, the body would quickly become dehydrated. So absorption is not just about nutrients, it's also about water balance. The blood vessels that carry the absorbed nutrients away from the intestine do not go straight to the heart, they go first to the liver. This is called the hepatic portal system. The word hepatic means liver. The word portal means door or gateway. The blood from the intestines flows through a vein called the hepatic portal vein, which carries it to the liver. The liver then sorts through what has arrived. It removes some things, stores some things, and sends the rest on to the general circulation. This is why the liver is sometimes called the body's chemical processing plant. It's the first stop for nearly everything absorbed from the gut. If you take a medicine by mouth, it also goes through this pathway, and the liver may modify it before it reaches the rest of the body. This is called first-pass metabolism, and it's one of the reasons some medicines are not given by mouth. The liver is a remarkable organ. It's the largest internal organ, weighing about 1.5 kilograms in an adult. It sits in the upper right part of the abdomen, under the ribs, and it's soft and spongy. It has two main lobes, a right and a left, and it receives blood from two sources. It receives oxygenated blood from the hepatic artery, and it receives nutrient-rich blood from the hepatic portal vein. These two streams mix inside the liver in tiny channels called sinusoids, and the liver cells, called hepatocytes, do their work. They store glucose as glycogen. They store vitamins and minerals. They make proteins that the blood needs, like albumin and clotting factors. They break down old red blood cells and recycle their parts. They make bile. They detoxify many substances, turning them into forms the body can excrete. The liver does all of this without rest, day and night, and it can regenerate itself if part of it is lost. It's a quiet, powerful organ, and it sits just under the diaphragm, working away in the soft darkness of the upper abdomen. Bile is one of the liver's products, and it's a good example of the body's economy. Bile contains bile salts, which help digest fats, but it also contains waste products, like bilirubin. Bilirubin is a yellowish substance that comes from the breakdown of old red blood cells. The liver puts bilirubin into the bile, and the bile carries it out of the body through the intestines. This is why stool is brown, because of the breakdown products of bilirubin. So bile is both a digestive helper and a waste disposal system. The liver makes it, the gallbladder stores it, and the small intestine uses it. The gallbladder is a small, pear-shaped pouch under the liver. It concentrates the bile and squeezes it out when fatty food enters the duodenum. If the gallbladder is removed, the liver still makes bile, but it drips continuously into the intestine rather than being stored and released in bursts. Most people can digest food fine without a gallbladder because the body adapts. The pancreas, as we mentioned, sends enzymes into the duodenum through a duct that usually joins the bile duct. The pancreatic enzymes work best in a slightly alkaline environment, so the pancreas also sends bicarbonate, which neutralizes the acid that comes from the stomach. This is important because the lining of the small intestine is not as protected as the stomach lining. The acid would damage it. So the pancreas does two things. It delivers the enzymes that finish digestion, and it delivers the buffer that makes the environment safe for those enzymes to work. It's a careful, balanced system, the acid from the stomach and the alkaline from the pancreas, meeting in the duodenum and finding a middle ground. Let's pause again on the idea of enzymes. Enzymes are proteins that speed up chemical reactions. They're specific, which means each enzyme works on a particular kind of molecule. Amylase works on starch. Pepsin works on protein. Lipase works on fat. The enzymes in the small intestine include maltase, sucrase, and lactase, which break down specific sugars. Maltase breaks down maltose into two glucose molecules. Sucrase breaks down sucrose, which is table sugar, into glucose and fructose. Lactase breaks down lactose, which is milk sugar, into glucose and galactose. Some people make less lactase as they get older, which is why some people have trouble digesting milk. The lactose stays in the intestine instead of being broken down, and the bacteria in the colon ferment it, which can cause gas and discomfort. This is not a disease, it's just a variation in how much enzyme the body makes. It's one of many small differences between people, and it shows how digestion depends on the presence of specific tools. Proteins are broken down into amino acids by a team of enzymes. Pepsin starts the work in the stomach. In the small intestine, trypsin and chymotrypsin from the pancreas continue the work, cutting the protein into smaller chains called peptides. Then enzymes on the surface of the enterocytes, called peptidases, cut the peptides into individual amino acids. The amino acids are then absorbed into the enterocytes and from there into the blood. There are 20 common amino acids, and the body uses them to build its own proteins, which become muscle, skin, hair, enzymes, hormones, and all the other protein-based structures. The protein in food is not used directly. It's dismantled into amino acids and then reassembled into human protein. This is one of the clearest examples of how food becomes body. Fats are handled a little differently. They are broken down by lipases, mainly from the pancreas. The bile salts first emulsify the fat, breaking it into tiny droplets. Then the lipase cuts the triglycerides, which are the main form of fat in food, into fatty acids and monoglycerides. These smaller pieces, along with bile salts, form tiny structures called micelles. The micelles carry the fat pieces to the surface of the enterocytes, where the fatty acids and monoglycerides diffuse into the cells. Inside the enterocytes, they're reassembled into triglycerides and packaged with proteins into particles called chylomicrons. These chylomicrons are too large to enter the blood capillaries directly, so they enter the lymphatic vessels in the villi. The lymphatic system then carries them slowly upward through larger and larger lymph vessels until they eventually empty into the bloodstream near the neck. From there, the chylomicrons travel through the blood to the tissues that need fat or that store it. This is a longer, slower route than the one taken by sugars and amino acids, but it works. The lymphatic system is a quiet partner in digestion. It's a network of thin vessels that runs alongside the blood vessels and carries a clear fluid called lymph. In the small intestine, the lymphatic vessels in the villi are called lacteals. They absorb the chylomicrons and carry them away. The lymphatic system also carries immune cells and helps defend the body, but in digestion, its role is to transport the larger fat particles that can't fit through the blood capillary walls. It's another example of how systems overlap, how the body reuses its infrastructure for different jobs. Now, let's return to the small intestine's own nervous system. The digestive tract has a network of nerves called the enteric nervous system. It's sometimes called the second brain because it can operate independently of the brain and spinal cord. It sits in the walls of the digestive tract in two main layers of nerve cells. It controls peristalsis, it controls secretions, it controls blood flow, and it senses what's in the tube. It communicates with the brain through the vagus nerve and other pathways, but it can also run the digestive process on its own. This is why digestion continues even when you're asleep, and even when you're not thinking about it at all. The second brain is not conscious. It doesn't think or feel in the way the brain does, but it coordinates a huge amount of activity, moment by moment, in the walls of the tube. The enteric nervous system works with hormones, which are chemical messengers made by cells in the stomach and intestine. Gastrin is a hormone made in the stomach that stimulates acid secretion. Secretin is a hormone made in the duodenum that tells the pancreas to send bicarbonate. Cholecystokinin, usually shortened to CCK, is a hormone made in the duodenum that tells the gallbladder to squeeze and the pancreas to send enzymes. It also slows stomach emptying. These hormones travel through the blood and act on distant organs. They're part of the endocrine system, but they're also part of digestion. The body uses both nerves and hormones to coordinate the long tube, and the two systems talk to each other constantly. By the time the food has passed through the small intestine, most of the nutrients have been absorbed. What's left is mostly water, fiber, some dead cells from the lining of the intestine, some bacteria, and the remains of bile. This mixture passes through another sphincter, the ileocecal valve, into the large intestine. The ileocecal valve is a small opening between the last part of the small intestine and the first part of the large intestine. It opens to let material through and closes to prevent backflow. The large intestine begins in the lower right part of the abdomen with a small pouch called the cecum. Attached to the cecum is a thin, worm-shaped tube called the appendix. The appendix used to be thought of as a useless leftover, but it may serve as a kind of reservoir for beneficial bacteria. It's not essential, but it may help repopulate the colon after an illness. The large intestine travels up the right side of the abdomen, which is called the ascending colon, then across the upper abdomen, which is called the transverse colon, then down the left side, which is called the descending colon, and then curves into the pelvis, which is called the sigmoid colon. It ends at the rectum and the anus. The walls of the large intestine are not covered with villi. They're smoother, and the main job is to absorb water and electrolytes and to form the stool. The bacteria in the large intestine ferment some of the fiber, making short-chain fatty acids that the colon cells can use for energy. They also make vitamin K and some B vitamins, which the body absorbs. This is a partnership. The bacteria get a warm, moist place to live, and the body gets a few extra nutrients and help with the fiber. The amount of water reclaimed by the colon is significant. The small intestine absorbs most of the water, but the colon absorbs enough to turn the liquid chyme into formed stool. If the colon moves too quickly, as with some infections or irritations, the stool stays watery and diarrhea results. If the colon moves too slowly, too much water is absorbed and the stool becomes hard, which is constipation. Neither is a disease by itself. There are signs that the usual rhythm is off. The colon has its own rhythm, with slow waves of contraction that move the material along. These waves are most active after a meal, when the stomach signals the colon to make room. This is called the gastrocolic reflex, and it's why the urge to use the bathroom often comes after eating. It's a normal, coordinated response, one part of the tube telling another part to move along. The rectum is the last part of the large intestine. It's a short, muscular storage area that holds the stool until it's time to release it. The anus is the final opening, controlled by two sphincters. The internal anal sphincter is smooth muscle and is not under voluntary control. The external anal sphincter is skeletal muscle and is under voluntary control. This is one of the few places in the digestive tract where voluntary muscle is involved. The rest of the tube runs itself, but the very end is guarded by a muscle you can choose to tighten or relax. This is a quiet, practical arrangement. The body holds the stool until the time and place are appropriate, and then the sphincters relax and the stool passes out. The tube is complete. What entered at the mouth leaves at the anus, and the journey is over. Now, let's step back and look at the digestive system as a whole. It's a tube, yes, but it's also a barrier. The inside of the tube is technically outside the body. That's a strange thought, but it's true. The tube runs through the body, but its inner surface is continuous with the outside world. The mouth is open to the outside, and the anus is open to the outside, and the inside of the tube is the same surface, just folded inward. The body's true inside is on the other side of the tube wall. This is why the lining is so carefully protected, and why the immune system has special tissue along the tube. The outside world is full of things that shouldn't come in. The digestive system is a gatekeeper, deciding what crosses the wall and what stays outside. The immune tissue in the digestive tract is called gut-associated lymphoid tissue, often shortened to GALT. It's scattered along the tube, in the tonsils, in the appendix, and in patches in the small intestine called Peyer's patches. These tissues sample what's in the tube and help the body decide what's harmless and what's not. This is a delicate balance, because the body needs to tolerate food and the normal bacteria while defending against harmful microbes. Most of the time, the balance holds, and the tube does its work without incident. The immune system is another partner in digestion, another layer of coordination. The blood supply to the digestive organs is rich. The arteries that serve the gut branch from the aorta, the big artery that runs down the center of the body. The celiac trunk serves the stomach, liver, and pancreas. The superior mesenteric artery serves the small intestine and the first part of the large intestine. The inferior mesenteric artery serves the rest of the large intestine. The blood brings oxygen and nutrients to the gut wall and carries away the absorbed nutrients. The blood flow increases after a meal, when the gut needs more oxygen to do its work. This is why people sometimes feel sleepy after a large meal, because blood is directed toward the gut and away from the brain. It's a gentle, normal shift, and it passes. The digestive system also has a close relationship with the nervous system beyond the enteric network. The sympathetic nervous system, which is the body's alert system, tends to slow digestion. The parasympathetic nervous system, which is the body's rest and digest system, tends to stimulate digestion. This is why stress can slow the gut or make it feel unsettled, and why rest can help it work smoothly. The vagus nerve is the main parasympathetic connection, running from the brainstem down to the organs, carrying signals that promote peristalsis and secretion. When you lie down and relax, the vagus nerve is more active and the gut does its work more comfortably. This is one of the quiet reasons that rest and digestion go together. The body has a mode for eating and processing, and it works best when the alert system is quiet. It's also worth noting that the digestive tract has its own sensory nerves. These nerves can detect stretching and chemical changes and temperature, and they send signals to the brain. Most of these signals don't reach conscious awareness. You don't feel the stomach churning or the intestine absorbing. But sometimes the signals do reach awareness, as hunger, as fullness, as the mild discomfort of gas, as the pleasant warmth of a good meal. The gut and the brain are in constant, quiet conversation, and the signals travel both ways. The brain can influence the gut, and the gut can influence the brain. This is the basis of what some people call the gut-brain axis, and it's an area of growing research. The gut has its own nervous system, its own hormones, its own bacteria, and all of these can affect mood and sleep and general well-being in ways we're only beginning to understand. For now, the main point is simple. The digestive system is a long, layered, self-regulating tube that takes in the outside world and turns it into the inside world. It's made of cells, which form tissues, which form organs, which form a system. It's lined with mucosa, moved by muscle, helped by glands, regulated by nerves and hormones, and inhabited by bacteria. It absorbs water and nutrients, and it lets go of what's left. It works in the dark, under the ribs, below the diaphragm, all day and all night, without being asked. And it does this with a slow, patient rhythm, wave after wave, door after door, fold after fold. You don't need to remember the names of the enzymes or the hormones or the regions of the colon. You don't need to hold on to the details. The details are here for the listening, but not for the keeping. What you might keep is a sense of the system as a whole, a feeling for the long, soft tube and its quiet work. When you eat, food enters a hallway with many doors. When you rest, the hallway keeps working. When you sleep, the waves keep moving, the folds keep absorbing, the liver keeps sorting, and the bacteria keep fermenting. The body is never still, even in sleep, but it's a gentle kind of motion, a slow, steady, almost silent motion, like water moving through a riverbed in the dark. As the next part of this series unfolds, we'll move from the tube itself to the substances that move through it and the ways the body uses what it absorbs. But there's no need to think about that now. There's no need to think about anything at all. The stomach may be empty or it may be full. The intestine may be quiet or it may be working. Either way, the body knows what to do. It has been doing this since before you were born, and it will keep doing it long after you fall asleep. The wave moves along. The doors open and close. The folds catch what they can, and the outside world, very slowly, becomes you. Now let's think about what the digestive system actually receives, not in terms of organs and tubes, but in terms of the substances themselves. Because the tube is only half the story. The other half is what travels through it, and what happens to those substances once they cross the wall and enter the body proper. This is where digestion becomes nutrition, and where the quiet work of the gut becomes the quiet work of every cell. It's a long, slow process, and it begins with the three main fuels: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. We touched on them earlier, but now we can slow down and look at each one a little more carefully, because each one has its own path through the body, and each one has its own quiet fate. Carbohydrates are the body's preferred fuel. They're made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and they come in many forms. The simplest carbohydrates are sugars, like glucose, fructose, and galactose. Glucose is the most important one, because it's the sugar that every cell in the body can use for energy. Fructose is the sugar in fruit and honey. Galactose is part of milk sugar. When two simple sugars are linked together, they form a disaccharide. Sucrose, which is table sugar, is glucose and fructose linked. Lactose, which is milk sugar, is glucose and galactose linked. Maltose, which is found in sprouting grains, is two glucose molecules linked. When many sugars are linked together in long chains, they form complex carbohydrates. Starch is a complex carbohydrate made by plants, a long chain of glucose molecules. Glycogen is the animal version, a branched chain of glucose stored in the liver and muscles. Fiber is also a complex carbohydrate, but the links between its sugars are shaped in a way that human enzymes can't break. So fiber passes through the tube mostly unchanged, while starch and sugars are broken down and absorbed. The digestion of starch begins in the mouth, where salivary amylase snips the long chain into smaller pieces. It continues in the small intestine, where pancreatic amylase finishes the job, cutting the chains into maltose and other small sugars. Then the enzymes on the surface of the enterocytes, the brush border enzymes, cut the small sugars into single sugars. Maltose becomes glucose and glucose. Sucrose becomes glucose and fructose. Lactose becomes glucose and galactose. These single sugars are then absorbed into the enterocytes. Glucose and galactose are absorbed by active transport, which means the cells use energy to pull them in. Fructose is absorbed by facilitated diffusion, which means it moves along with a carrier without using energy directly. Once inside the enterocytes, the sugars pass into the blood and travel to the liver. The liver is the central hub for sugar. When glucose arrives, the liver can do several things with it. It can release it into the general circulation so other cells can use it. It can store it as glycogen for later. It can convert it into fat if there is more than the body needs. The hormone insulin, made by the pancreas, helps move glucose into cells and promotes storage. The hormone glucagon, also made by the pancreas, does the opposite. It tells the liver to release stored glucose when blood sugar is low. This is one of the body's most carefully regulated systems. The amount of glucose in the blood stays within a narrow range because the brain depends on a steady supply. If blood sugar falls too low, the brain becomes foggy and the body feels weak. If blood sugar stays too high for too long, it can damage blood vessels and nerves, so the liver and the pancreas work together to keep the balance, releasing and storing, signaling and responding, all day and all night. Proteins are different. Proteins are made of amino acids, and there are 20 common ones. 9 of these are essential, which means the body can't make them, and they must come from food. The other 11 can be made by the body from other amino acids or from other molecules. When you eat protein, whether it's from meat or beans or eggs or milk, the digestive system takes it apart. The stomach's acid and pepsin begin the work. The pancreas sends trypsin and chymotrypsin to continue it. The brush border enzymes finish it. The result is a mixture of individual amino acids which are absorbed into the enterocytes and then into the blood. The blood carries them to the liver, and from there, they are distributed to the cells. Cells use amino acids to build their own proteins. These proteins are not just muscle. They're enzymes, which speed up chemical reactions. They're hormones, which carry signals. They're receptors, which sit in cell membranes and catch signals. They're transport proteins, which carry molecules in the blood. They're structural proteins, which give shape to cells and tissues. They're immune proteins, which defend the body. They're contractile proteins, which allow muscle to shorten. Every one of these is built from amino acids, arranged in a precise order, folded into a precise shape. The instructions for the arrangement come from DNA, and the assembly happens in tiny structures inside the cell. But the raw material comes from food. The protein in a piece of fish or a spoonful of lentils is dismantled into amino acids, and those amino acids are reassembled into human protein. The body doesn't know or care where they came from. It just uses what it's given. If there are more amino acids than the body needs for building, the liver can convert them into other things. Some amino acids can be converted into glucose through a process called gluconeogenesis. Others can be converted into fat. The nitrogen part of the amino acid is removed and turned into urea, which the kidneys excrete in urine. This is a quiet, constant process. The body is always breaking down old proteins and building new ones, and the nitrogen waste from that turnover is always being cleared. It's part of the body's steady state, the balance between breakdown and rebuilding that keeps everything working. Fats are the third major fuel. Fats are also called lipids, and they come in several forms. The main form in food is triglycerides, which are made of 3 fatty acids attached to a glycerol molecule. Fatty acids are long chains of carbon and hydrogen, and they can be saturated or unsaturated depending on how the carbon atoms are linked. Saturated fats are usually solid at room temperature, like butter and coconut oil. Unsaturated fats are usually liquid, like olive oil and fish oil. Fats are more concentrated than carbohydrates or proteins. A gram of fat provides about 9 calories, while a gram of carbohydrate or protein provides about 4. So fat is a dense, efficient storage form of energy. The digestion of fat requires bile and lipase. The bile breaks the fat into small droplets, and the lipase cuts the triglycerides into fatty acids and monoglycerides. These are absorbed into the enterocytes, reassembled into triglycerides, packaged into chylomicrons, and sent into the lymph. From the lymph they enter the blood and travel to the tissues. Fat is used for many things. It's stored in fat cells as an energy reserve. It's used to build cell membranes, which are made of a double layer of lipids. It's used to make hormones and other signaling molecules. It cushions organs and insulates the body. It carries fat-soluble vitamins. So fat is not just stored energy, it's a structural and functional material, essential for life. Vitamins and minerals are the small nutrients, needed in tiny amounts but no less important. Vitamins are organic molecules that the body can't make in sufficient amounts, so they must come from food. They're divided into water-soluble and fat-soluble. The water-soluble vitamins are the B vitamins and vitamin C. They dissolve in water and are not stored in large amounts, so they need to be consumed regularly. The fat-soluble vitamins are A, D, E, and K. They dissolve in fat and are stored in the liver and fat tissue. Minerals are inorganic elements like calcium, iron, potassium, sodium, magnesium, zinc, and iodine. They come from the soil and enter the food chain through plants and animals. The body uses them for bones, for blood, for nerve signals, for muscle contraction, for enzyme function, and for many other purposes. Water is the most essential nutrient of all. The body is about 60% water. Every cell, every tissue, every system depends on water. It's the solvent in which all chemical reactions happen. It carries nutrients and waste. It lubricates joints and surfaces. It helps regulate temperature. The digestive system uses water to make saliva, gastric juice, bile, and pancreatic juice, and then reclaims most of it before the waste leaves the body. The sensation of thirst is the body's way of asking for more water, and it's usually a reliable guide. By the time you feel thirsty, the body has already begun to conserve water, and the kidneys are holding on to what they can. Drinking water throughout the day keeps the tube moving and the blood flowing and the cells working. Now, let's think about energy, because energy is what ties all these nutrients together. The body needs energy to do everything, from breathing to thinking to digesting. Energy is measured in calories, but that's just a unit of heat. 1 calorie is the amount of energy needed to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. The food calories we talk about are actually kilocalories, each one 1,000 of the small calories. The body extracts energy from food through a series of chemical reactions that happen inside the cells, mainly in the mitochondria. Mitochondria are tiny structures inside cells, often called the powerhouses. They take the breakdown products of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, and they use oxygen to release the energy stored in their chemical bonds. This energy is captured in a molecule called ATP, which is the cell's energy currency. ATP powers almost everything, from muscle contraction to nerve signaling to protein synthesis. The body is always making and using ATP every second in every cell. The raw material for ATP comes from food, and the oxygen comes from breathing. So digestion and respiration are partners. The digestive system brings in the fuel, the respiratory system brings in the oxygen, and the cells do the burning, slowly and efficiently. The basal metabolic rate is the amount of energy the body uses at rest, just to keep the basic functions going. For most adults, this is somewhere around 1,200 to 1,500 calories per day, though it varies with age, sex, body size, and muscle mass. This energy goes to the heart, which beats about 100,000 times a day. It goes to the lungs, which expand and contract about 20,000 times a day. It goes to the kidneys, which filter the blood day and night. It goes to the brain, which uses a surprising amount of energy for its size. It goes to the maintenance of body temperature, the repair of tissues, the production of new cells. All of this happens without your attention. The body spends energy just being alive, and that energy comes from food. When you eat more energy than the body needs, the excess is stored. Some is stored as glycogen in the liver and muscles, but glycogen storage is limited. The rest is stored as fat in adipose tissue. When you eat less energy than the body needs, the body draws on its stores. It uses glycogen first, then fat. This is the simple arithmetic of energy balance. It's not the whole story of health, because food is more than just energy, but it's the basic framework. The body is a careful bookkeeper, and it tracks the flow of energy in and out. The digestive system also responds to the composition of food. A meal high in refined carbohydrates raises blood sugar quickly, and the pancreas releases insulin to bring it down. A meal high in protein and fat and fiber raises blood sugar more slowly, and the insulin response is gentler. This is one reason that whole foods, with their fiber and their natural structure, are digested more slowly than processed foods. The body is not designed for sudden floods of refined sugar. It can handle them, but it works more comfortably with a steady, gradual flow. The tube is built for slow release, and the hormones are built for steady regulation. It's also true that digestion changes with age, with stress, with sleep, with time of day. The digestive system has its own daily rhythm, called the circadian rhythm. The gut is more active during the day, when food is likely to arrive, and less active at night, when the body rests. Melatonin, the sleep hormone, also affects the gut, slowing motility and reducing secretions. This is why eating late at night can feel heavier, and why the body sometimes struggles with a large meal right before bed. The digestive system wants to rest too. It wants the same quiet hours that the rest of the body wants. When you lie down to sleep, the gut slows down, the waves become gentler, the secretions taper off. The tube is still working, but it's working in a low, soft mode, like a house at night with only a few lights on. The bacteria in the gut also have their own rhythms and their own preferences. They feed on what we feed them, especially fiber. A diet rich in plant foods supports a diverse community of bacteria, and a diverse community is generally a resilient one. These bacteria produce short-chain fatty acids, which nourish the colon and have effects on the immune system and even the brain. The gut microbiome is a huge, complex ecosystem, with trillions of residents from thousands of species. It's not a separate thing from the body. It's a part of the body's extended system, a partnership that has been evolving for millions of years. The bacteria help digest fiber, make vitamins, train the immune system, and crowd out harmful microbes. In return, they get a warm, moist, food-rich environment. It's a fair trade, and it's happening in the dark, quietly, all the time. Now, let's slow down further and consider the act of eating itself, because digestion begins before the first bite. The sight and smell of food trigger the cephalic phase of digestion. The word cephalic means head. When you see food, or smell it, or even think about it, the brain sends signals through the vagus nerve to the stomach and the salivary glands. The mouth waters, the stomach begins to secrete a little acid, and the body prepares itself. This is a learned response, built on past experience. The smell of bread baking, the sight of a ripe peach, the memory of a warm soup, all of these set the stage. The body is not a passive recipient, it's an active participant, anticipating what's coming and getting ready. This is why the first bite of a meal is often the most satisfying, because the body has been preparing for it and the senses are fully engaged. Chewing is the first mechanical step. It seems simple, but it's important. Chewing increases the surface area of the food, making it easier for enzymes to work. It mixes the food with saliva, which moistens it and starts starch digestion. It also begins to release the flavors, which are detected by taste receptors on the tongue. Taste is not just for pleasure, it's a guide. Sweetness signals carbohydrates, which are quick energy. Saltiness signals minerals. Umami signals protein. Sourness and bitterness can signal spoilage or toxins, though many bitter foods are healthy. The body reads the food through the tongue, and the brain responds. The taste of food, along with its smell and texture, triggers the release of digestive hormones and enzymes. So eating is a sensory act as much as a mechanical one, and the senses are part of the digestive system. Swallowing is the next step, and it's more complex than it seems. The tongue pushes the chewed food, now called a bolus, back toward the pharynx. The soft palate lifts to close off the nasal passages. The epiglottis tilts down to cover the larynx. The upper esophageal sphincter relaxes, and the bolus enters the esophagus. Then peristalsis takes over, a wave of contraction that moves the bolus down to the stomach. This whole sequence is coordinated by a swallowing center in the brainstem, and it happens in about 1 second. It's one of the most precisely coordinated actions in the body, and it happens every time you swallow, day and night, usually without your noticing. Even the saliva you swallow between meals, about 1 liter or more per day, makes the same journey, a quiet, continuous trickle that keeps the tube clean and the tissues moist. Once the food reaches the stomach, the pace slows down. The stomach holds the food and works on it for 2 to 4 hours, depending on the meal. The waves of the stomach grind and mix, and the acid and pepsin begin to break down protein. The stomach also releases a hormone called ghrelin, which is sometimes called the hunger hormone. Ghrelin rises before meals and falls after eating. It's one of the signals that tells the brain when to eat and when to stop. But hunger and fullness are not just hormones. They're also influenced by stretch, by blood sugar, by the senses, by habit, by emotion, by the time of day. The body has many ways of knowing when it needs food and when it has enough, and most of them work in the background, quietly. The small intestine is where the pace is most carefully regulated. As chyme enters the duodenum, it triggers feedback signals that slow the stomach and match the flow to the intestine's capacity. The small intestine is also where most of the chemical breakdown and absorption happens. The villi and microvilli are the work surfaces, and the enterocytes are the gatekeepers. The small intestine moves the chyme along at a rate of about 1 centimeter per minute, which is slow enough for absorption to happen. It takes 3 to 5 hours for a meal to pass through the small intestine. That's a long, slow transit, and it's deliberate. The body is not in a hurry. It's extracting what it can, molecule by molecule. By the time the remaining material reaches the large intestine, most of the nutrients are gone. What's left is fiber, water, some minerals, and the remains of dead cells and bacteria. The colon takes its time, often 12 to 48 hours. It reclaims water and minerals, and the bacteria ferment what they can. The result is stool, which is about 75% water and 25% solids. The solids are mostly bacteria, fiber, and dead cells. The brown color comes from the breakdown of bilirubin. The smell comes from the fermentation gases. None of this is glamorous, but it's normal, and it's the end of a long, careful process. The act of elimination is the final step, and it's one the body manages with the same quiet coordination as the rest. The rectum stretches as stool arrives, and this triggers the urge to go. The internal anal sphincter relaxes, and the external sphincter, which is under voluntary control, either relaxes or holds. The muscles of the pelvic floor and the abdomen help push, and the stool passes out. Then the tube rests for a while, empty and quiet, until the next meal arrives. The whole cycle, from mouth to anus, takes about a day or two, but it's not a fixed schedule. It varies with the person, the meal, and the circumstances. The body adjusts, and the tube keeps its own time. Now, consider how much work the digestive system does without any conscious help. You don't have to remember to make saliva. You don't have to tell the stomach to churn. You don't have to direct the enzymes or the bile or the peristalsis. The body does all of this automatically, using the same basic mechanisms that have been at work in animals for hundreds of millions of years. The first simple digestive systems appeared in early animals, simple tubes with a mouth and an anus. Over evolutionary time, the tube became more complex, with specialized regions and accessory organs. But the basic plan has stayed the same. Take in food, break it down, absorb what's useful, let go of the rest. It's one of the oldest and most reliable designs in nature, and it's still working perfectly well. There's something reassuring in that. The body knows what to do. It's been doing it since before there were brains to think about it, and it will keep doing it while you sleep. You don't have to manage the digestive system. You just have to feed it, sometimes, and let it do its work. The more you can rest, the better it works. The less you interfere, the smoother it runs. This is not to say that diet doesn't matter. It does. The food you choose becomes the raw material for everything else. But the processing itself is not your job. It's the body's job, and it's very good at it. As the next section opens, we'll move from the substances and their fate to the systems that deliver them to the cells, the blood and the lymph, and the organs that filter and regulate, the liver and the kidneys. But for now, there's no need to go anywhere. The nutrients are moving through the tube, or they're resting in the liver, or they're circulating in the blood. The cells are taking what they need and releasing what they don't. The energy is flowing, the proteins are turning over, the fats are doing their quiet work. It's a whole economy in there, a slow, steady metabolism, and it runs on the food you've already eaten and the air you're breathing now. It doesn't need your attention. It doesn't need your worry. It just needs rest, and time, and the gentle rhythm of breath and heartbeat, going on and on, in the dark, under the skin, while the words wash over you and the night settles in. The digestive system does not work in isolation. It sends what it absorbs into the blood, and the blood carries those materials to every part of the body. So now we turn to the cardiovascular system, the network of vessels and the pump that keeps everything moving. This is the delivery system, the road network, the quiet circulation that reaches every cell. It's made of the heart, the blood vessels, and the blood itself, and it's always working, always moving, always carrying things from one place to another. Even now, as you lie still, the heart is beating, the vessels are pulsing, and the blood is making its rounds. It's one of the most constant rhythms in the body, and it never stops for rest. The heart is a muscle, about the size of a fist, sitting in the chest behind the sternum and between the lungs. It's tilted slightly to the left, which is why people feel it more on the left side. It's not a complicated shape. It's a hollow organ with 4 chambers, 2 on the right and 2 on the left. The upper chambers are the atria, and the lower chambers are the ventricles. The atria receive blood, and the ventricles pump it out. The right side of the heart pumps blood to the lungs, where it picks up oxygen and lets go of carbon dioxide. The left side of the heart pumps blood to the rest of the body, where it delivers oxygen and nutrients and picks up waste. So the heart is actually 2 pumps side by side, working together in a single rhythm. The blood enters the right atrium from 2 large veins, the superior vena cava, which brings blood from the upper body, and the inferior vena cava, which brings blood from the lower body. From the right atrium, the blood passes through a valve into the right ventricle. When the right ventricle contracts, it pushes the blood through another valve into the pulmonary artery, which carries it to the lungs. In the lungs, the blood flows through tiny vessels around the air sacs, where it picks up oxygen and releases carbon dioxide. Then it returns to the heart through the pulmonary veins, entering the left atrium. From the left atrium, the blood passes through a valve into the left ventricle. The left ventricle is the strongest chamber because it has to pump blood all the way through the body. When it contracts, it pushes the blood through the aortic valve into the aorta, the largest artery, which branches into smaller and smaller vessels that reach every tissue. The valves in the heart are important because they keep the blood moving in one direction. They open when the pressure behind them is higher, and they close when the pressure in front of them is higher. The closing of the valves is what makes the sound of the heartbeat, the lub and the dub. The lub is the closing of the valves between the atria and the ventricles. The dub is the closing of the valves between the ventricles and the great arteries. These sounds are soft and regular, and they happen about 70 times a minute in a resting adult, which is more than 100,000 times a day. The heart never stops. It slows down during sleep, but it never pauses. It just keeps beating, quietly, faithfully, from before birth until the very end. The blood vessels are the roads. Arteries carry blood away from the heart. Veins carry blood back to the heart. Capillaries are the tiny vessels in between, where the actual exchange happens. Arteries have thick, elastic walls because they have to handle the pressure of the heart's contraction. The aorta and its large branches stretch when the heart beats and recoil when it relaxes, which keeps the blood moving smoothly. Smaller arteries branch into arterioles, which are narrow and muscular, and they control how much blood goes to each tissue. Arterioles open and close, a little at a time, directing blood where it's needed and reducing it where it's not. This is how the body adjusts blood flow during digestion, during exercise, during rest. The digestive organs receive more blood after a meal. The muscles receive more blood during activity. The skin receives more blood when the body needs to cool down. The arterioles are the valves of the system, and they adjust themselves moment by moment. Capillaries are the smallest vessels, so small that red blood cells have to pass through in single file. Their walls are only 1 cell thick, which allows oxygen and nutrients to pass out into the tissues, and carbon dioxide and waste to pass back in. Most of the exchange happens by diffusion, which is the natural movement of molecules from areas of higher concentration to areas of lower concentration. Oxygen is high in the blood and low in the tissues, so it moves out. Carbon dioxide is high in the tissues and low in the blood, so it moves in. The same happens with nutrients. Glucose and amino acids and fatty acids move from the blood into the cells where they're used. Waste products move from the cells into the blood, where they're carried away. It's a slow, gentle exchange, happening in every part of the body, in billions of tiny vessels all at once. After the blood passes through the capillaries, it enters the venules, which merge into larger veins. Veins have thinner walls than arteries, because the pressure is lower. They also have valves inside them, little flaps that keep the blood from flowing backward. This is especially important in the legs, where blood has to travel upward against gravity. The muscles of the legs help push the blood along when they contract, and the valves keep it from falling back down. This is why moving the legs, even gently, helps circulation. When you lie still for a long time, the blood still returns to the heart, but the movement of the limbs makes it easier. The body is designed for gentle motion, and even the smallest movement helps the blood along its way. The blood itself is a fluid tissue. It's made of plasma, which is mostly water, and of cells that float in the plasma. The red blood cells carry oxygen. They're shaped like discs with a dimple in the middle, which gives them more surface area. They're filled with hemoglobin, a protein that binds oxygen in the lungs and releases it in the tissues. Hemoglobin is what makes blood red. When it's carrying oxygen, it's bright red. When it has released the oxygen, it's darker, more bluish. The red blood cells are made in the bone marrow, and they live for about 4 months before they're broken down and recycled. The liver and the spleen help with the recycling, and the iron from the hemoglobin is saved and used again. It's a careful, circular system with very little waste. The white blood cells are part of the immune system. They defend the body against infection and foreign material. There are several kinds, each with its own role. Some white blood cells patrol the blood and tissues, looking for anything that doesn't belong. Some make antibodies, which are proteins that bind to specific targets and mark them for destruction. Some engulf and digest invaders directly. The white blood cells are not as numerous as the red blood cells, but they're always present, always watching, always ready. They're one of the reasons the body can handle the constant exposure to microbes from the outside world, including the microbes that come in with food. The platelets are small cell fragments that help the blood clot. When a vessel is damaged, the platelets gather at the site and stick together, forming a temporary plug. Then a cascade of clotting factors, made by the liver and circulating in the plasma, forms a more permanent seal. The clot stops the bleeding and gives the vessel time to heal. This is a finely balanced system. Too little clotting leads to bleeding. Too much clotting leads to blockages. The body keeps the balance through a network of activators and inhibitors, always checking, always adjusting. Most of the time, the balance holds, and the blood flows smoothly through the vessels, neither leaking nor clotting, just moving along. The blood also carries heat. The body's core temperature stays around 37 degrees Celsius, or 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. The blood is one of the main ways heat is distributed. When the body is warm, blood vessels in the skin dilate, allowing more blood to flow near the surface, where heat can escape. When the body is cold, the skin vessels constrict, keeping the blood deeper and conserving heat. This is why the skin flushes when you're warm and pales when you're cold. The blood is also part of the body's water balance, because plasma is mostly water, and the kidneys adjust how much water is kept or released. The blood is the common medium that connects all the systems, carrying oxygen, nutrients, hormones, heat, water, and waste, all at once, all the time. Now, let's think about what happens to the absorbed nutrients after they leave the digestive system. The sugars, the amino acids, the fatty acids, they all enter the blood or the lymph and travel to the liver. The liver is the first checkpoint. It receives the blood from the digestive tract through the portal vein, and it sorts through what's arrived. It stores glucose as glycogen. It packages fats into lipoproteins for transport. It makes proteins for the blood. It removes toxins and breakdown products. It regulates the levels of many substances in the blood, keeping them within safe ranges. The liver is not just a processing plant. It's a gatekeeper, a buffer, a steady hand that keeps the blood's composition stable. The blood from the liver then enters the general circulation, traveling through the hepatic vein to the inferior vena cava and then to the right side of the heart. From there it goes to the lungs, where it picks up oxygen, and then to the left side of the heart, which pumps it out to the body. This is the full circuit. The blood goes from the gut to the liver to the heart, from the heart to the lungs, from the lungs back to the heart, and from the heart to the tissues. Then it returns through the veins to the heart again, and the cycle repeats. It takes about a minute for blood to make the full loop, though the time varies with the route. The blood to the brain takes only a few seconds. The blood to the toes takes longer. But everything is connected, and everything is moving. The lymphatic system runs alongside the blood vessels, collecting the fluid that leaks out of the capillaries and returning it to the blood. This fluid, called lymph, is clear and watery. It carries the chylomicrons from the small intestine, the fat particles that are too large for the blood capillaries. It also carries immune cells and other materials. The lymphatic vessels merge into larger ducts, which empty into the veins near the neck. The lymph nodes are small, bean-shaped structures along the vessels, and they filter the lymph, trapping foreign material and activating immune responses. When you have an infection, the lymph nodes near the site may swell because the immune cells are gathering and working. This is a normal response, a sign that the system is doing its job. The cardiovascular system and the lymphatic system together form the transport network of the body. They connect the digestive system, which brings in the materials, to the cells which use them. They connect the lungs, which bring in oxygen, to the tissues which need it. They connect the kidneys, which filter the blood, to the rest of the body, which depends on the blood's composition. They connect the brain, which sends signals, to the organs which respond. Everything is linked by the flow of blood and lymph, and the flow never stops. The heart's rhythm is controlled by its own electrical system. The signal starts in a small area called the sinoatrial node in the right atrium. This node fires a little impulse about 70 times a minute, and the impulse spreads through the atria, making them contract. Then the impulse reaches another node, the atrioventricular node, which delays it just long enough for the ventricles to fill. Then the impulse travels down through the ventricles, making them contract. This is the heartbeat, the lub-dub, the steady rhythm that drives the whole circulation. The rate can be adjusted by the nervous system. The sympathetic system speeds it up when the body needs more blood flow. The parasympathetic system slows it down when the body is at rest. During sleep, the parasympathetic system is more active, and the heart rate slows, sometimes to 50 or 60 beats per minute. The blood pressure also drops a little, and the vessels relax. The whole system settles into a quieter mode, still working, but working gently. The blood pressure is the force of the blood against the vessel walls. It's highest in the arteries, especially during the heart's contraction, and lowest in the veins. It's measured as two numbers, the systolic pressure during contraction and the diastolic pressure during relaxation. A normal resting pressure is around 120/80, but it varies from person to person and from moment to moment. The body regulates blood pressure through the kidneys, the hormones, the nervous system, and the vessels themselves. The goal is to keep enough pressure to push the blood through the vessels, but not so much that the vessels are damaged. It's another careful balance maintained without conscious effort. The blood also carries hormones, which are chemical signals made by glands and sent through the circulation to their target tissues. The hormones of the digestive system, like gastrin and secretin and cholecystokinin, travel in the blood. The hormones of the pancreas, like insulin and glucagon, travel in the blood. The hormones of the thyroid, the adrenal glands, the pituitary, the gonads, all travel in the blood. The blood is the highway for these signals, and the receptors on the target cells are the addresses. The hormone finds its receptor and delivers its message, and the cell responds. This is how the body coordinates its many parts, through the slow, steady circulation of chemical messengers. The blood also carries waste products to the organs that remove them. Carbon dioxide goes to the lungs. Urea goes to the kidneys. Bilirubin goes to the liver and then to the gut. The kidneys are the body's main filters, processing about 180 liters of blood per day and making about 1 to 2 liters of urine. They regulate water, salts, and pH, and they remove the nitrogen waste from protein metabolism. The kidneys sit in the back of the abdomen, one on each side of the spine, and they work quietly, day and night, filtering and adjusting, filtering and adjusting. They're connected to the cardiovascular system by the renal arteries and veins, and they're as essential as the heart and the lungs. The connection between the digestive system and the cardiovascular system is especially important after a meal. When food is absorbed, the blood flow to the gut increases, sometimes by as much as 50%. The heart may beat a little faster, and the blood vessels to the digestive organs dilate. This is one of the reasons a large meal can make you feel warm and sleepy. The blood is busy in the abdomen, and the body is directing energy toward digestion. It's a normal, healthy response, and it passes as the meal is processed. Lying down after a meal can feel natural, because the body is already shifting into a restful mode, with the parasympathetic system active and the digestive system at work. As we drift toward the end of this section, let's revisit the central idea. The digestive system brings in the materials. The cardiovascular system delivers them. The cells use them. The waste is carried away. The whole arrangement depends on flow. The blood flows through the vessels. The lymph flows through its channels. The nutrients flow from the gut to the liver to the tissues. The signals flow from the glands to the receptors. The heat flows from the core to the surface. It's all connected, all moving, all in balance, and none of it requires your attention. The heart beats on its own. The vessels adjust on their own. The blood carries what it carries, and the cells take what they need. You can let go of the details and just rest in the knowledge that the body is handling it, quietly and competently, while you drift. The body is always working to keep its internal world stable. This is the work of homeostasis, a word that means staying the same. The body doesn't stay exactly the same, of course. It moves around a set point, adjusting constantly, like a boat rocking gently on a calm sea. The temperature, the blood sugar, the water balance, the salt balance, the pH, the oxygen levels, all of these are kept within ranges that the cells can tolerate. The digestive system and the cardiovascular system play their parts, but the job of regulation falls mainly to the nervous system and the endocrine system, working together. These are the body's communication networks, one fast and electric, the other slower and chemical. And they are always talking, always adjusting, always keeping things steady in the background. The nervous system is the body's fast communication system. It uses electrical signals that travel along nerve cells, called neurons, at speeds up to 100 meters per second. These signals carry information from the senses to the brain, and from the brain to the muscles and glands. The nervous system has two main divisions. The central nervous system is the brain and the spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system is everything else, all the nerves that branch out through the body. The peripheral system has two further divisions. The somatic system controls voluntary movement, the muscles you choose to move. The autonomic system controls involuntary functions, the heart, the lungs, the gut, the glands, the vessels. The autonomic system has two branches. The sympathetic branch prepares the body for action, the alert response, the quickening of the heart, the widening of the airways, the release of stored energy. The parasympathetic branch does the opposite. It calms the body, slows the heart, stimulates digestion, promotes rest. These two branches are always active, always balancing each other, like two hands on a steering wheel, one turning left, one turning right, keeping the body on the road. The vagus nerve is the main parasympathetic pathway to the organs of the chest and abdomen. It runs from the brainstem down through the neck and into the body, sending branches to the heart, the lungs, the stomach, the liver, the pancreas, and the intestines. When the vagus nerve is active, the heart slows, the breathing deepens, the digestive secretions increase, and the gut's motility picks up. This is the rest and digest response. It's the state the body enters when it feels safe, when there's no threat, when the demands of the day have fallen away. Lying in bed, in the dark, listening to a soft voice, the vagus nerve is likely active, and the body is in its restful mode. This is a good state for sleep, and a good state for digestion. The two go together. The endocrine system is the body's slow communication system. It uses hormones, which are chemical messengers released into the blood. Hormones travel through the circulation and bind to receptors on their target cells. The response is slower than a nerve signal, but it lasts longer. The endocrine system includes the pituitary gland, the thyroid gland, the parathyroid glands, the adrenal glands, the pancreas, the gonads, and other smaller groups of cells. Each gland makes specific hormones, and each hormone has specific effects. The pituitary, a small gland at the base of the brain, is often called the master gland because it controls many of the others. But the pituitary is itself controlled by the hypothalamus, a small area of the brain just above it. The hypothalamus is the bridge between the nervous system and the endocrine system. It receives signals from the body and the brain, and it directs the pituitary, which directs the other glands. So the two communication systems are not separate. They are deeply interwoven, a single control network with fast and slow channels. The pancreas is both an endocrine gland and an exocrine gland. As an exocrine gland, it makes digestive enzymes and sends them through a duct to the small intestine. As an endocrine gland, it makes insulin and glucagon and sends them into the blood. Insulin lowers blood sugar by helping glucose enter cells and by promoting storage. Glucagon raises blood sugar by telling the liver to release stored glucose. These two hormones are made by clusters of cells in the pancreas, called the islets of Langerhans. The beta cells make insulin, the alpha cells make glucagon. They respond to the level of glucose in the blood, releasing more insulin when glucose is high and more glucagon when glucose is low. This is a classic homeostatic loop, a negative feedback system. The variable is blood glucose. The sensors are the islet cells. The effectors are the liver, the muscles, and the fat tissue. The result is a stable level of glucose, with small rises and falls around the set point. It's a quiet, constant regulation, happening every minute of every day. The thyroid gland, in the front of the neck, makes hormones that control the body's metabolic rate. These hormones, thyroxine and triiodothyronine, set the pace for every cell. They influence how quickly the body uses energy, how warm it stays, how fast the heart beats, how alert the brain is. The thyroid is controlled by the pituitary, which releases thyroid-stimulating hormone. The pituitary is controlled by the hypothalamus, which releases thyrotropin-releasing hormone. This is a cascade, a chain of command, with the brain at the top and the cells at the bottom. The thyroid hormones feed back to the brain, telling it when to reduce the signal. If thyroid hormone levels are low, the brain increases the signal. If they're high, the brain reduces it. This is negative feedback again, the same pattern as blood sugar, the same pattern as almost every regulated system in the body. The body senses what's there, compares it to what's needed, and adjusts. The adrenal glands sit on top of the kidneys, two small triangular glands. They have two parts. The outer part, the cortex, makes steroid hormones, including cortisol and aldosterone. The inner part, the medulla, makes adrenaline and noradrenaline, also called epinephrine and norepinephrine. The medulla is wired directly to the sympathetic nervous system, so when the body needs a quick response, the adrenal medulla releases its hormones into the blood, and the heart speeds up, the airways widen, the pupils dilate, and the digestive system slows down. This is the fight-or-flight response, the body's emergency mode. It's useful in short bursts, but it's not meant to be on all the time. The cortex makes cortisol, which is a slower, longer-lasting stress hormone. Cortisol helps the body manage stress by raising blood sugar, reducing inflammation, and altering the immune response. But when cortisol stays high for too long, it can disrupt sleep, digestion, and mood. The body is built for cycles of stress and rest, activation and recovery. The sympathetic system raises the body up, and the parasympathetic system settles it back down. Both are needed, and the balance between them is what keeps the body healthy. The kidneys are also endocrine organs, in addition to their filtering role. They make erythropoietin, which tells the bone marrow to make more red blood cells. They make renin, which is part of a system that regulates blood pressure and fluid balance. The renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system is a long chain of chemical signals that starts when the kidneys sense low blood pressure or low sodium. Renin converts a protein in the blood into angiotensin 1, which is converted to angiotensin 2 by an enzyme in the lungs. Angiotensin 2 raises blood pressure by constricting vessels and by telling the adrenal glands to release aldosterone. Aldosterone tells the kidneys to hold onto sodium and water, which raises blood volume and blood pressure. This is another negative feedback loop, keeping blood pressure stable. It's a slow system, acting over minutes to hours, but it's always in the background, adjusting the body's fluid balance. The hormones of the digestive system also participate in homeostasis. Gastrin, secretin, cholecystokinin, and others regulate the digestive process itself, but they also influence satiety and hunger. Ghrelin, from the stomach, rises before meals and promotes hunger. Leptin, from fat tissue, signals long-term energy stores and promotes satiety. Insulin, from the pancreas, signals recent food intake and promotes satiety as well. These signals come together in the hypothalamus, which integrates them and influences appetite and energy expenditure. This is the body's energy homeostasis, the long-term balance between intake and output. It's not perfect and it can be influenced by many factors, but the basic machinery is there, and it works quietly in the background, shaping when you feel hungry and when you feel full. The body's water balance is another carefully regulated system. The hypothalamus senses the concentration of the blood, and when the blood becomes too concentrated, it triggers thirst and tells the pituitary to release antidiuretic hormone. Antidiuretic hormone tells the kidneys to hold on to water, making the urine more concentrated. When the blood is too dilute, the hormone is suppressed, and the kidneys release more water. The kidneys are the main effectors here, but the digestive system contributes by absorbing water from food and drink, and the skin contributes by losing water through sweat. The cardiovascular system distributes the water, and the endocrine system regulates it. It's a network of systems working together to keep the body's fluid balance steady. Temperature regulation is another homeostatic process. The hypothalamus is the thermostat. It receives signals from temperature sensors in the skin and in the body's core, and it compares them to the set point. If the body is too warm, the hypothalamus triggers sweating and dilates the skin vessels. Heat is lost through the evaporation of sweat and the radiation from the skin. If the body is too cold, the hypothalamus triggers shivering and constricts the skin vessels. Shivering generates heat through muscle activity, and the constricted vessels conserve heat. The thyroid hormone also adjusts the metabolic rate over longer periods. The body's temperature follows a daily rhythm, dipping in the early morning and peaking in the late afternoon. During sleep, the temperature drops slightly, which helps the body enter and maintain deep sleep. A cool room and a warm blanket are often the best conditions for rest because they help the body's temperature regulation do its work. The pH of the blood is kept within a very narrow range, around 7.35 to 7.45. This is slightly alkaline. The body maintains this balance through buffers in the blood, through the lungs, which adjust carbon dioxide levels, and through the kidneys, which adjust bicarbonate levels. The digestive system contributes acid to the stomach, but that acid is neutralized in the small intestine, and the blood's pH is protected. The body is very careful about pH because even small changes can affect enzyme function and nerve activity. The buffer systems act quickly, the lungs act within minutes, and the kidneys act within hours to days. It's a layered defense, with fast and slow components, all working to keep the blood's chemistry stable. The immune system is not usually described as a homeostatic system, but it shares the same logic. It distinguishes self from non-self, and it responds to threats while tolerating the body's own tissues and the harmless microbes that live in the gut. It has fast responses, like the innate immune system, and slower, more specific responses, like the adaptive immune system. The innate system includes barriers, like the skin and the mucosa, and cells like macrophages and neutrophils that engulf and destroy invaders. The adaptive system includes lymphocytes, the B cells and T cells, which learn to recognize specific threats and remember them. This is why vaccines work, by exposing the immune system to a harmless piece of a pathogen so it can remember and respond quickly if the real thing arrives. The immune system is also involved in the gut, as we mentioned, in the GALT, the gut-associated lymphoid tissue. The body is constantly exposed to foreign material through food, and the immune system has to decide, moment by moment, what to tolerate and what to attack. Most of the time, it gets it right, and the result is a peaceful coexistence with the outside world. The digestive system itself is a homeostatic system. It maintains the supply of nutrients, the balance of water, the population of bacteria, the rhythm of motility. It adjusts to the size and composition of meals. It absorbs more or less of certain minerals, depending on what the body needs. The absorption of iron and calcium is regulated by hormones and by the body's stores. When iron is low, the intestine absorbs more. When iron is high, it absorbs less. Calcium is regulated by parathyroid hormone and vitamin D, which adjust absorption in the gut, release from bone, and excretion by the kidneys. These are homeostatic loops, all connected to the digestive system, all working quietly to keep the body's internal environment steady. Sleep is one of the body's most important restorative states, and it is regulated by homeostatic and circadian systems. The homeostatic drive for sleep builds up during the day, increasing the longer you're awake. The circadian system, governed by a small area in the hypothalamus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, keeps time with the light-dark cycle. As evening comes, the pineal gland releases melatonin, which signals the body to prepare for sleep. The body temperature drops, the heart rate slows, the digestive system winds down, and the brain's activity changes. Sleep is not a single state. It has stages, from light sleep to deep sleep to REM sleep, and the body cycles through them several times a night. Deep sleep is when the body repairs tissues, builds bone and muscle, and strengthens the immune system. REM sleep is when the brain is active and dreaming occurs. Both are needed, and the body regulates the balance between them. When you don't get enough sleep, the homeostatic drive increases, and the body tries to catch up. When you sleep well, the drive resets, and the body wakes rested. The digestive system is connected to sleep, because the parasympathetic system is more active at night, and the gut's motility slows down. A full, heavy meal before bed can disrupt sleep, because the digestive system is working hard while the rest of the body wants to rest. A light meal, or nothing at all, is often easier. The body knows how to balance these demands, and it signals through hunger and fullness, through sleepiness and wakefulness, through the quiet rhythms of the day and night. Now, let's slow down and just sit with the idea of balance. The body is not a machine that runs at a fixed speed. It's a living system that adjusts itself constantly. It takes in materials, uses them, stores some, releases some. It takes in information, responds to it, remembers some, lets go of some. It works in cycles, daily cycles, monthly cycles, seasonal cycles, and it moves around a center that never quite stays still. This is the nature of homeostasis. It's not rigidity, it's flexibility within limits. It's the boat on the calm sea, rocking gently, never exactly where it was a moment ago, but never far from where it should be. The digestive system is part of this. The cardiovascular system is part of this. The nervous and endocrine and immune systems are all part of this. They are not separate systems, really. They are one system, seen from different angles, each one a way of looking at the whole. And you don't need to manage any of it. The body manages itself. You can eat, and the body will digest. You can drink, and the kidneys will filter. You can breathe, and the lungs will exchange. You can rest, and the body will repair. You can sleep, and the body will restore. All of this happens without your attention, without your effort, without your worry. The best thing you can do is give the body what it needs, and then let it do its work. Food, water, movement, rest, light, darkness, warmth, quiet. These are the inputs, and the body does the rest. It's a partnership, but the body does most of the work. It always has, it always will. As the next section approaches, we'll move further into the body's structure, into the muscles and bones that hold it up, and the ways they work with the systems we've already touched. But for now, there's no need to go anywhere. The body is here, warm and quiet, doing its work. The blood is moving. The hormones are signaling. The kidneys are filtering. The liver is sorting. The gut is resting. The brain is slowing down, letting the day's thoughts recede. And the whole system, all of it, is rocking gently on the calm sea, staying the same, by changing, moment by moment, breath by breath, until sleep comes. Now we move to the framework that holds everything in place. The bones and muscles, the scaffolding and the cables, the structure that gives the body its shape and lets it move through the world. This is the musculoskeletal system, and it's one of the largest systems in the body. It's what you feel when you press your fingers against a table, when you stand up, when you lie down and let the bed take your weight. It's the quiet architecture under the skin, the solid thing inside the soft thing, and it works so smoothly that most of the time you don't notice it at all. The skeleton is made of bones. An adult human body has 206 of them, though the number varies a little from person to person. Some people have extra small bones in their hands or feet, and some have fewer in their spine. Bones are not dry and dead like the ones you might see in a museum. Living bone is moist and alive, full of blood vessels and nerves and cells that constantly break down and rebuild the bone tissue. This process is called remodeling, and it happens throughout life. The body is always taking away a little old bone and laying down a little new bone, adjusting the shape and strength to match the loads placed on it. This is why bones get stronger when you use them and weaker when you don't. The body responds to what's asked of it, and the bones are always listening. Bone is a composite material, which means it's made of two things with different properties, combined to make something stronger than either one alone. The first part is a protein framework, mostly collagen, which gives bone its flexibility. The second part is a mineral, mostly calcium phosphate, which gives bone its hardness. The collagen is like the rebar in concrete, and the mineral is like the concrete itself. Together they make a material that's strong in compression, resisting being crushed, and strong in tension, resisting being pulled apart. It's light enough for the body to carry, but strong enough to support the weight of a person and the forces of movement. If you could build a beam from bone, it would be stronger than most wood and some metals, weight for weight. It's a remarkable material, and the body makes it from the calcium and phosphorus in food, with the help of vitamin D and the hormones that regulate calcium. The skeleton has two main divisions. The axial skeleton is the central axis, the skull, the spine, the ribs, and the sternum. The appendicular skeleton is the limbs, the arms and legs, and the girdles that attach them, the shoulders and the pelvis. The axial skeleton protects the most important organs. The skull protects the brain. The spine protects the spinal cord. The ribs and sternum protect the heart and lungs. The appendicular skeleton is more about movement, with long bones that act as levers and joints that allow them to swing and rotate. The upper limbs are built for reaching and grasping, with a wide range of motion. The lower limbs are built for weight-bearing and walking, with more stability and less mobility. The pelvis is the connector, a strong ring of bone that transfers the weight of the upper body down into the legs, and it protects the organs of the lower abdomen. The bones connect to each other at joints. Some joints are fixed, like the seams between the bones of the skull, which are locked together and don't move. Some joints are slightly movable, like the joints between the vertebrae, which allow small movements that add up to the flexibility of the whole spine. Some joints are freely movable, like the shoulder, the elbow, the hip, the knee. These are the synovial joints, and they're the ones that allow the body to move through space. In a synovial joint, the ends of the bones are covered with smooth cartilage, and the whole joint is enclosed in a capsule filled with synovial fluid. The fluid lubricates the joint, the way oil lubricates a hinge, and the cartilage cushions the ends of the bones. It's a simple, elegant design, and it lasts for decades if it's treated well. Muscles are the body's motors. There are 3 types of muscle tissue. Skeletal muscle is the type attached to bones, and it's under voluntary control. It's what you use to move your arms and legs, to sit up, to turn over in bed. Cardiac muscle is the type in the heart, and it's not under voluntary control. It beats on its own, with its own rhythm, and it never rests. Smooth muscle is the type in the walls of the digestive tract, the blood vessels, the airways, and other internal organs. It's also not under voluntary control. It contracts slowly and rhythmically, pushing food along the tube, adjusting the width of vessels, moving things through the body. All 3 types of muscle work by the same basic mechanism, the sliding of protein filaments inside the muscle cells. The proteins actin and myosin slide past each other, shortening the cell, and when many cells shorten together, the whole muscle pulls. It's a molecular ratchet, powered by ATP, the energy molecule, and triggered by calcium ions. The details are complex, but the effect is simple. The muscle shortens, and the pull moves the bone. Skeletal muscles attach to bones through tendons, which are tough cords of connective tissue. When a muscle contracts, it pulls on the tendon, and the tendon pulls on the bone. Muscles usually work in pairs because they can only pull, not push. The biceps on the front of the upper arm bends the elbow. The triceps on the back straightens it. When one contracts, the other relaxes. This is coordinated by the nervous system, which sends signals to both muscles at once, telling one to shorten and the other to lengthen. The same pattern applies everywhere, in the legs, the back, the neck, the fingers. Every movement is a balance of pulls, a cooperation between opposing muscles, all coordinated by the brain and the spinal cord. The muscles are also important for posture and for heat. Even when you're lying still, the muscles are not completely off. They have a small amount of resting tension, called muscle tone, which keeps the body from collapsing. The muscles along the spine keep the back straight when you sit or stand. The muscles in the neck keep the head from falling forward. The muscles in the legs keep the knees from buckling. This postural tone is controlled by reflexes in the spinal cord and the brainstem, and it works without your attention. Muscles also generate heat when they contract. When you shiver, the muscles contract rapidly and rhythmically, producing heat to warm the body. This is one of the body's responses to cold, and it shows how the musculoskeletal system is involved in homeostasis, not just movement. The bones are also involved in homeostasis because they store calcium and phosphorus. These minerals are essential for many functions, from nerve signaling to muscle contraction to blood clotting. The body keeps the level of calcium in the blood within a narrow range, and the bones are the reservoir. When blood calcium is low, parathyroid hormone tells the bones to release calcium, and tells the kidneys to hold onto it, and tells the gut to absorb more. When blood calcium is high, calcitonin, a hormone from the thyroid, does the opposite. The bones are not just a frame, They're a mineral bank, and the body makes deposits and withdrawals as needed. The bank is built during childhood and adolescence when the bones are growing and accumulating mass. Peak bone mass is reached in the early 20s, and after that the balance shifts, slowly, toward gradual loss. The more bone you build early on, the more you have in reserve later. This is why nutrition and activity in youth matter for bone health in old age. The body is a long-term project, and the bones are part of that project. The muscles are also a storage tissue, not for minerals but for energy. The muscles store glycogen, the body's carbohydrate reserve. When you eat, some of the glucose is stored as glycogen in the muscles, where it can be used quickly during activity. The muscles also store protein, though the body is more reluctant to break down muscle protein for energy, because muscle is expensive to build and essential for movement. The muscles are also a major site of glucose uptake, especially after a meal, when insulin tells the cells to take in glucose. Muscle tissue is metabolically active, burning energy even at rest, and this is why people with more muscle mass tend to have higher basal metabolic rates. The muscles are not just for moving, they're part of the body's energy economy. The skeleton and the muscles work together with the nervous system to produce movement. The process begins in the brain, in the motor cortex, where the intention to move is formed. The signal travels down the spinal cord, through motor neurons, to the muscles. The muscles contract, the bones move, and the body acts. This is voluntary movement, but it's also influenced by the cerebellum, which coordinates timing and smoothness, and by the basal ganglia, which help select and initiate movements. The sensory system provides feedback, telling the brain where the body is in space, how much force is being used, whether the movement is going as planned. This is proprioception, the body's sense of itself, and it's essential for everything from walking to turning over in bed. The receptors are in the muscles, tendons, and joints, and they send constant signals to the brain, which integrates them and adjusts the movement. Most of this happens below awareness, and it happens continuously, even in sleep, as the body shifts position and adjusts the covers. Sleep is a time when the musculoskeletal system rests, but it's not completely still. The body changes position many times during the night, shifting from side to side, adjusting the limbs, turning the head. These movements prevent pressure sores and keep the joints from stiffening. The muscles relax deeply in REM sleep, when the body is almost paralyzed, so the limbs don't act out dreams. In deep sleep, the body releases growth hormone, which helps repair tissues and build muscle and bone. This is why sleep is essential for recovery, for healing, for growth. The body does its maintenance work at night, when the demands of the day are gone. The muscles and bones are rebuilt, the tissues are repaired, the energy stores are replenished. Sleep is not a pause, it's an active process, and the musculoskeletal system is one of the main beneficiaries. The joints are especially sensitive to rest and movement. Synovial fluid is produced and circulated when the joints move. When you sit or lie still for too long, the fluid doesn't circulate as well, and the joints can feel stiff. When you move, even gently, the fluid is pushed around and the joints loosen up. This is why a gentle stretch in the morning feels good, and why a short walk helps after sitting. The body likes a balance of rest and movement. Too much rest and the tissues weaken. Too much movement and the tissues wear. The middle way is what the body wants, and it signals through comfort and discomfort, through energy and fatigue, through ease and stiffness. The body knows what it needs, and it asks for it in quiet ways. Now, let's think about the spine, because it's the center of the musculoskeletal system, and it's involved in almost everything. The spine is a column of 33 bones, called vertebrae, stacked on top of one another. Between each pair of vertebrae is a disc, a soft cushion of cartilage that absorbs shock and allows movement. The spine has 4 curves, in the neck, the chest, the lower back, and the pelvis. These curves help the spine carry weight and absorb impact, like a spring. The spine protects the spinal cord, which runs through a canal in the back of the vertebrae. Nerves branch out from the cord through spaces between the vertebrae, carrying signals to and from the rest of the body. The spine is both a protector and a conduit, and its health affects everything below the neck. The spine is supported by a complex web of muscles and ligaments. The deep muscles of the back run along the spine, holding it upright and controlling its movements. The abdominal muscles support the front, forming a kind of corset that stabilizes the trunk. The diaphragm, the main breathing muscle, attaches to the lower ribs and the spine, and it works with the abdominal muscles to control pressure inside the abdomen. The psoas muscles, deep in the abdomen, connect the spine to the legs, and they're involved in walking and in sitting. The spine is not a rigid pillar, it's a flexible, dynamic structure, supported by muscle on all sides, and it moves with every breath, every shift of weight, every turn of the head. The pelvis is the foundation of the spine. It's a ring of bone made of three parts: the ilium, the ischium, and the pubis, fused together in adulthood. The sacrum, the lower part of the spine, fits into the back of the pelvis, and the two hip joints sit on either side. The pelvis transfers the weight of the upper body down into the legs, and it provides attachment for many muscles, including the glutes, the hamstrings, and the muscles of the pelvic floor. The pelvic floor is a sheet of muscle that supports the organs of the lower abdomen, the bladder, the rectum, and in women, the uterus. It's involved in continence, in breathing, in stability, and it works quietly in the background, holding things in place. The pelvis is the meeting point of the upper and lower body, and it's one of the most important structural regions in the body. The legs are built for stability and load-bearing. The femur, the thigh bone, is the longest and strongest bone in the body. It runs from the hip to the knee, and it carries the weight of the body above it. The knee is a hinge joint with strong ligaments and cartilage that absorb the impact of walking and running. The lower leg has two bones, the tibia and the fibula. The tibia is the main weight-bearing bone, and the fibula is a thinner bone that provides attachment for muscles. The foot is a complex structure of many small bones, arranged in arches that absorb shock and adapt to the ground. The arches are supported by muscles and ligaments, and they flatten slightly when you step and spring back when you lift. The foot is a remarkable piece of engineering, and it carries the whole body through the world. The arms are built for mobility and manipulation. The shoulder is the most mobile joint in the body, a ball and socket joint that can move in almost any direction. This mobility comes at a cost, because the shoulder is less stable than the hip, and it relies heavily on muscles to keep it in place. The elbow is a hinge joint, like the knee, and it allows the arm to bend and straighten. The forearm has two bones, the radius and the ulna, which rotate around each other, allowing the hand to turn palm up and palm down. The hand is a marvel of fine motor control, with 27 bones and many small muscles, all coordinated to grasp, hold, pinch, and manipulate. The thumb is especially important because it can oppose the fingers, which gives the human hand its unique ability to handle tools. The arms and hands are the body's interface with the world, and they're involved in almost everything we do. The muscles of the arms and legs are arranged in compartments, each with its own nerve and blood supply. The muscles of the upper arm, for example, are divided into the front compartment, which bends the elbow, and the back compartment, which straightens it. The muscles of the thigh are divided into the front compartment, which straightens the knee, the back compartment, which bends it, and the inner compartment, which brings the legs together. This arrangement is systematic, and it makes sense when you understand that muscles can only pull. The body organizes them in groups that pull in different directions, and the nervous system coordinates them. The result is smooth, controlled movement, from the gross movements of walking to the fine movements of writing. The muscles and bones are living tissues, and they need a steady supply of blood. The arteries that serve the limbs branch from the aorta, the main artery. The arms receive blood through the subclavian arteries, which become the axillary and then the brachial arteries. The legs receive blood through the common iliac arteries, which become the femoral arteries. The veins return the blood to the heart, and in the legs they have valves that prevent backflow. The muscles help pump the blood along, squeezing the veins with each contraction. This is the skeletal muscle pump, and it's one of the reasons that regular movement is good for circulation. When you walk, the muscles in your calves squeeze the veins, pushing the blood up toward the heart. When you lie still, the pump is less active, but the blood still returns, carried by the low pressure in the veins and the pull of the diaphragm. The nerves that serve the muscles and bones branch from the spinal cord. The cervical nerves in the neck serve the arms and hands. The lumbar nerves in the lower back serve the legs and feet. The nerves carry motor signals to the muscles and sensory signals from the skin, muscles, and joints. This is the peripheral nervous system in action, and it's the way the brain and spinal cord stay in touch with the rest of the body. When you move, the brain sends a signal, the nerve carries it, the muscle contracts, the bone moves. When you touch something, the sensory nerve carries the signal back to the brain, and you feel it. This loop, from brain to body and back, is the foundation of every action and every sensation. The musculoskeletal system is also involved in breathing. The diaphragm, the main breathing muscle, is a skeletal muscle, though it works automatically. The intercostal muscles, between the ribs, help expand and contract the chest. The muscles of the abdomen help with forced breathing, like when you blow out a candle or sigh deeply. The act of breathing, which happens thousands of times a day, is a muscular act, and it depends on the same basic machinery as walking and reaching. The diaphragm contracts, the chest expands, the lungs fill, the diaphragm relaxes, the chest recoils, the air leaves. It's a quiet, rhythmic movement, and it continues in sleep, slow and deep, driven by the same muscles that lift and carry and hold. As we come to the end of this section, let's rest in the sense of the body's structure. Under the skin, there is a scaffold of bone, 206 pieces, joined by cartilage and ligament, moved by muscle, controlled by nerve, fed by blood. It's strong enough to carry you through a lifetime, flexible enough to bend and turn and lie down and rest. It's alive, constantly remodeling, constantly adapting, constantly listening to what's asked of it. And right now, it's doing very little. It's lying still, supported by the bed, letting the weight settle into the mattress. The muscles are quiet, the bones are still, the joints are open, the spine is long, the breath is slow, the body is at rest, and the framework that holds it is resting too. There's nothing to do, nothing to hold up, nothing to move, just the quiet weight of the body on the bed, and the slow, gentle rise and fall of the chest, and the knowledge that the structure is there, holding you, even in sleep. The lungs and the airways are the body's connection to the outside air. This is the respiratory system, and its job is simple. Bring in oxygen, let out carbon dioxide, and do it over and over again, day and night, without stopping. The body can go weeks without food, days without water, but only minutes without air. Oxygen is the most urgent need, the most immediate requirement. Every cell in the body depends on it, and the respiratory system is the path by which it arrives. It's a quiet system, mostly silent, working in the background like the others, but it's always there, always moving, always exchanging, and it's tied to everything else in ways that are easy to overlook. The air enters through the nose or the mouth. The nose is the preferred route, because it's built to prepare the air. The inside of the nose is lined with mucosa, the same moist lining that covers the digestive tract, and it's rich with blood vessels. These vessels warm the air as it passes through, bringing it closer to body temperature. The mucosa also adds moisture, because the lungs need air that is warm and humid. The hairs and mucus in the nose filter out dust and particles, trapping them before they can travel deeper. The nasal cavity has shelf-like bones called turbinates, which increase the surface area and create turbulence, so the air swirls and has more time to be warmed and humidified and cleaned. This is why breathing through the nose feels different from breathing through the mouth. The nose is the body's air conditioner, and it does its work with quiet efficiency. From the nose, the air passes into the pharynx, the same shared hallway that food passes through. Then it moves into the larynx, the voice box, which sits at the top of the trachea. The larynx contains the vocal cords, two folds of tissue that vibrate when air passes between them, producing sound. The larynx also has a role in protection. When you swallow, the epiglottis covers the opening, and the vocal cords close tightly, keeping food and drink out of the airway. The larynx is a gatekeeper, a sound maker, and a passageway, all at once. Below the larynx is the trachea, the windpipe. The trachea is a tube about 10 to 12 centimeters long, made of rings of cartilage that keep it open. These rings are shaped like a C, with the open part at the back, so the esophagus behind it has room to expand when food passes through. The trachea is lined with a mucosa that has tiny hair-like projections called cilia. The cilia beat upward, sweeping mucus and trapped particles up toward the throat, where they can be swallowed or coughed out. This is the mucociliary escalator, a quiet cleaning system that works all day and all night, keeping the airways clear. The trachea divides into two main bronchi, one for each lung. The bronchi divide again and again, like the branches of a tree, into smaller and smaller airways. The smallest airways are called bronchioles, and they end in clusters of tiny air sacs called alveoli. The alveoli are the actual site of gas exchange. There are about 300 million of them in an adult lung, and if you spread them out flat, they would cover an area about the size of a tennis court. This is the same trick the small intestine uses, the folding and branching that creates enormous surface area in a small space. The lungs are mostly air, light and spongy, and they fill the chest cavity on either side of the heart. The alveoli are surrounded by a dense network of capillaries. The walls of the alveoli and the capillaries are both extremely thin, only 1 cell thick, and the distance between the air and the blood is less than a micrometer. Oxygen diffuses from the air into the blood, where it binds to hemoglobin in the red blood cells. Carbon dioxide diffuses from the blood into the air, to be breathed out. This exchange happens passively, driven by differences in concentration. The air in the alveoli is high in oxygen and low in carbon dioxide. The blood arriving from the body is low in oxygen and high in carbon dioxide. The gradients favor the movement of oxygen in and carbon dioxide out, and it happens in less than a second as the blood passes through the capillary. It's a quiet, continuous exchange happening millions of times per breath. The lungs are not muscles. They can't move on their own. They're moved by the muscles of breathing, mainly the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles. The diaphragm is a dome-shaped sheet of muscle that forms the floor of the chest cavity. When it contracts, it flattens and moves downward, which increases the volume of the chest and pulls air into the lungs. When it relaxes, it rises back into its dome shape, which decreases the volume and pushes air out. This is quiet breathing, the kind you do without thinking. The intercostal muscles, between the ribs, help with deeper breaths, expanding the chest further and allowing more air in. During forced breathing, like when you sigh deeply or blow out a candle, the abdominal muscles also get involved, pushing the diaphragm up more forcefully. But most of the time, breathing is a gentle, automatic act, driven by the diaphragm and regulated by the brainstem. The control of breathing is one of the most carefully regulated processes in the body. The respiratory centers in the brainstem send rhythmic signals to the diaphragm and intercostal muscles, telling them to contract and relax on a regular schedule. This rhythm can be adjusted by the brain, by emotions, by activity, by sleep. But the main regulator is the level of carbon dioxide in the blood. When carbon dioxide rises, the blood becomes slightly more acidic, and chemoreceptors in the brainstem and in the carotid arteries detect this change. They send signals that increase the rate and depth of breathing, which blows off more carbon dioxide and brings the levels back down. When carbon dioxide falls, the signal decreases and breathing slows. This is negative feedback again, the same pattern as blood sugar and blood pressure. The body senses what's there, compares it to what's needed, and adjusts. Oxygen levels are also monitored, but carbon dioxide is the primary driver. This is why holding your breath becomes uncomfortable, not because you're running out of oxygen, but because carbon dioxide is building up. The urge to breathe is the urge to let go of carbon dioxide. When you finally take a breath, the relief is the drop in carbon dioxide, the restoration of balance. It's a simple, elegant system, and it works without your attention, every minute of every day. The respiratory system and the cardiovascular system are close partners. The heart pumps blood to the lungs, where it picks up oxygen and releases carbon dioxide, and then pumps it to the body, where the oxygen is used and the carbon dioxide is produced. The two systems meet in the alveoli, where the exchange happens. The blood that returns from the lungs is bright red, rich with oxygen, and it flows into the left side of the heart, which sends it out through the aorta. The blood that returns from the body is dark red, low on oxygen, and it flows into the right side of the heart, which sends it back to the lungs. This is the double circulation, the pulmonary circuit and the systemic circuit, and it's all driven by the same heart, the same pump, the same quiet rhythm. The respiratory system also helps regulate the body's pH. Carbon dioxide, when it dissolves in the blood, forms carbonic acid, which lowers the pH. By adjusting the rate of breathing, the body can adjust the amount of carbon dioxide in the blood, and therefore the pH. Breathe faster, and the pH rises. Breathe slower, and the pH falls. This is one of the body's buffer systems, working alongside the kidneys and the chemical buffers in the blood. It's another example of how the systems overlap, how the lungs are not just for oxygen but also for acid-base balance. Breathing changes with the state of the body. During rest, breathing is slow and shallow, about 12 to 16 breaths per minute in an adult. During sleep, it slows further, especially in deep sleep, and becomes very regular. The body's oxygen demand is low, and the carbon dioxide production is low, so the breathing settles into a quiet rhythm. The diaphragm moves gently, the chest rises and falls, and the air flows in and out, soft and steady. This is one of the most calming rhythms in the body, and it's one of the reasons that focusing on the breath is such a common way to relax. The breath is always there, always moving, always gentle, and it reflects the state of the body. When the body is calm, the breath is calm. When the body is tense, the breath is shallow and quick. By slowing the breath, you can signal the body to settle, and the body responds. The breath is a bridge between the voluntary and the involuntary, between the conscious and the automatic. You can choose to breathe slowly, and the body will follow. The respiratory system also has a role in the immune system. The airways are lined with mucosa that traps particles and microbes, and the cilia sweep them out. There are also immune cells in the lungs, called alveolar macrophages, which engulf and destroy anything that reaches the deep airways. The lungs are exposed to the outside world with every breath, and they have to defend themselves constantly. Most of the time, the defenses work, and the lungs stay clear and healthy. When the defenses are overwhelmed, infections can take hold, but the body usually recovers, and the system returns to its quiet baseline. The lungs are also involved in speech. The air that passes through the larynx vibrates the vocal cords, and the muscles of the larynx adjust the tension and position of the cords, changing the pitch and volume. The mouth, tongue, and lips shape the sound into words. Speech is a respiratory act, a controlled release of air, shaped by the structures of the upper airway. When you speak, you're using the same system that keeps you alive, repurposed for communication. The breath carries the words, and the words carry the meaning, and the whole thing is built on the quiet rhythm of inhalation and exhalation. Now, let's think about the lungs themselves, their structure and their place in the chest. The lungs are cone-shaped organs, one on each side of the chest, separated by the heart and the great vessels. The right lung has 3 lobes, and the left lung has 2, leaving room for the heart. Each lung is covered by a thin membrane called the pleura. The pleura has two layers, one on the surface of the lung and one on the inside of the chest wall, with a small amount of fluid between them. This fluid lubricates the surfaces, so the lungs can slide smoothly as they expand and contract. The pleural space also has a slight negative pressure, which helps keep the lungs inflated. The lungs are not attached to the chest wall, but they follow its movements, pulled along by the pressure changes. It's a delicate balance, and it works so smoothly that most people never think about it. The diaphragm sits below the lungs, and the abdominal organs sit below the diaphragm. The liver, the stomach, the spleen, the intestines, all of them live in the abdomen, pressed upward against the diaphragm. When the diaphragm contracts and flattens, it pushes down on the abdominal organs, and the abdomen rises slightly. This is why the belly moves when you breathe, especially when you breathe deeply. The diaphragm is both a respiratory muscle and an abdominal muscle, and it separates the two cavities. It's the floor of the chest and the roof of the abdomen, and it's one of the hardest working muscles in the body, contracting about 20,000 times a day. The lungs are light and spongy, and they float in water. They're mostly air, with a network of airways and blood vessels running through them. The airways are like the branches of a tree, and the alveoli are like the leaves, where the exchange happens. The blood vessels are like the roots, bringing blood to the surface for gas exchange. The whole structure is designed for one purpose: to bring air and blood together across the thinnest possible barrier, so oxygen can enter and carbon dioxide can leave. It's a simple design, but it's been refined over hundreds of millions of years, and it works with remarkable efficiency. As we come to the end of this section, let's rest in the rhythm of the breath. The air is moving in and out, slow and quiet. The diaphragm is rising and falling. The chest is expanding and relaxing. The oxygen is crossing the alveolar walls, binding to hemoglobin, traveling through the blood. The carbon dioxide is crossing the other way, rising up the airways, leaving the body. The lungs are doing their work, and the heart is doing its work, and the blood is doing its work, all together, all in rhythm. There's nothing to do, nothing to control, nothing to manage. The breath comes and goes on its own, and the body takes what it needs. You can let the breath be slow, and the body will settle. You can let the breath be deep, and the body will relax. You can let the breath be quiet, and the body will follow. The breath is the body's oldest rhythm, the first and the last, and it carries you through the night, soft and steady, in and out, in and out. Now we come to the last part of this long, slow walk. The body has been our subject, and we have moved through its systems one by one, from the tube that takes in food to the blood that carries it, from the bones that hold the shape to the lungs that bring the air. We have touched on the nerves that carry signals and the hormones that carry messages, the quiet regulators that keep everything steady. But there is one system left, the one that ties all the others together and makes sense of them. It is the nervous system itself, the brain and the spinal cord and the nerves, and it is the part of the body that lets you know you have a body at all. It is the seat of sensation and movement, of memory and mood, of sleep and waking. And it is the system that is listening to these words right now, letting them in, letting them fade. The nervous system is built from cells called neurons. A neuron is a cell that is specialized for communication. It has a cell body which holds the nucleus and the machinery of life. It has dendrites, which are branches that receive signals from other neurons. And it has an axon, a long, thin fiber that carries signals away to other neurons, or to muscles, or to glands. The signals are electrical, brief pulses of voltage that travel along the axon at high speed. When the signal reaches the end of the axon, it triggers the release of a chemical messenger, called a neurotransmitter, which crosses the tiny gap to the next cell and carries the signal forward. This is how the brain talks to the body, through chains of neurons, electrical pulses, and chemical messages, over and over, millions of times per second. The brain is the largest part of the nervous system, and it is the most complex object known. It weighs about 1.5 kilograms, and it is made of about 86 billion neurons, each one connected to thousands of others. The brain is not a uniform mass. It has regions, each with different functions. The cerebrum is the largest part, the folded outer layer, and it is responsible for thought, memory, language, perception, and voluntary movement. It is divided into two hemispheres, left and right, which communicate through a thick band of fibers. The cerebellum sits at the back, below the cerebrum, and it coordinates movement and balance. The brainstem is the oldest part, connecting the brain to the spinal cord, and it controls the basic functions of life: breathing, heart rate, blood pressure, sleep, and waking. Deep inside the brain are the thalamus, which relays sensory information, the hypothalamus, which controls homeostasis and hormones, and the limbic system, which handles emotion and memory. Each part has its role, and they all work together in ways we are still learning to understand. The spinal cord is the long cable that runs from the brain down through the spine. It carries signals between the brain and the body, and it also handles some reflexes on its own. When you touch something hot, the signal travels to the spinal cord, and the cord sends a signal back to the muscle to pull away, before the brain even knows what happened. This is a reflex, a fast, automatic response, and it protects the body from harm. The spinal cord is also a pathway, carrying sensory signals up to the brain and motor signals down to the muscles. It is protected by the vertebrae, the bones of the spine, and it is bathed in cerebrospinal fluid, which cushions it and nourishes it. The peripheral nerves branch out from the spinal cord in the brain, reaching every part of the body. They carry sensation from the skin, the muscles, the joints, the organs. They carry motor signals to the muscles. They carry autonomic signals to the heart, the lungs, the gut, the glands. The nerves are the body's wiring, and they are everywhere, under the skin, along the bones, around the organs. They are the reason you can feel the bed under you, the warmth of the blanket, the soft movement of your chest as you breathe. They are the reason the body knows where it is in space, even with your eyes closed. They are the reason the digestive system works, the heart beats, the lungs fill. The nervous system is the great coordinator, the network that connects every part to every other part. The brain and the body are not separate, they are one system, and the distinction between them is a convenience, not a truth. The brain is always receiving signals from the body, and the body is always responding to signals from the brain. This is how mood affects digestion, and digestion affects mood. This is how stress tightens the muscles and slows the gut. This is how rest calms the mind and steadies the heart. The brain is not a rider on a horse. It is part of the same animal, and the animal is always moving, always adjusting, always alive. Sleep is one of the brain's great functions. It is not a shutting down, it is a different kind of activity. During sleep, the brain cycles through stages, each with its own pattern of electrical activity. In deep sleep, the brain waves are slow and large, and the body repairs itself. In REM sleep, the brain is almost as active as in waking, and dreams occur. The brain consolidates memories during sleep, moving them from temporary storage to long-term storage. It clears waste products that build up during the day. It resets the systems, balances the hormones, restores the energy. Sleep is the body's nightly maintenance, and it is essential for every system. The digestive system rests and repairs. The cardiovascular system slows and steadies. The musculoskeletal system rebuilds. The immune system strengthens. The brain processes and clears. All of this happens while you lie still, breathing softly, letting the night pass. And now, as this series comes to an end, there is nothing more you need to learn, nothing more you need to hold on to. The body is not a test to pass. It is a home to live in. The systems we have walked through one by one are not separate machines. They are one living whole, and they have been working together since the moment you began. The cells make tissues. The tissues make organs. The organs make systems, and the systems make you. And you are here, lying in the dark, breathing, listening, resting. The body knows what to do. It always has. It is digesting, circulating, filtering, repairing, regulating, all at once, all without being asked. And as the night goes on, the rhythms slow, the systems settle, and the body moves deeper into rest. If you'd like to come back to any of this while you're awake, the No Fluff Anatomy and Physiology Guide is at the link in the description, and it covers the same ground in a form you can actually read. And if you want the same subject taught properly while you're awake, the No Fluff Academy channel has the awake version. But you don't need any of that now. Now you can just let the words go. Let the ideas drift. Let the body do its quiet work. The breath is slow. The heart is steady. The muscles are heavy and soft. The mind is settling, like water becoming still. There is nothing to solve, nothing to remember, nothing to do. The body is enough. The night is enough. The quiet is enough. Let the last bits of the day fall away, like leaves from a tree, drifting down, settling. Let the body sink a little deeper into the bed. Let the breath be long and easy. Let the darkness be warm and safe. You are made of cells, and the cells know how to rest. You are made of tissues, and the tissues know how to heal. You are made of organs, and the organs know how to work. You are made of systems, and the systems know how to balance. You are a living whole, and the whole knows how to sleep. So let it happen. Let the body take over. Let the mind grow quiet. Let the breath grow slow. Let the heart beat on, steady and soft. Let the blood move through the vessels, carrying what it carries, releasing what it releases. Let the lungs fill and empty, fill and empty. Let the stomach rest, the liver sort, the kidneys filter. Let the bones lie still, the muscles loosen, the joints open. Let the brain drift through its stages, moving from waking to sleeping, from thought to dream. You don't have to remember any of this. You don't have to hold on to a single word. The words have served their purpose, and now they can fade. What remains is the quiet, the dark, the soft weight of the body on the bed, the slow rise and fall of the chest. That is enough. That is everything. Sleep will come when it comes. There is no need to rush it. There is no need to chase it. It is not something you do. It is something the body does. When the time is right, when the mind lets go, when the night is deep and still. So let go, just a little. Let the day fall away. Let the body rest. Let the night hold you. Let sleep come, soft and slow, like rain on the roof, like the tide coming in, like the last light fading from the sky. And when you wake, the body will still be there, working quietly, waiting for the new day. The heart will still be beating, the lungs will still be breathing, the blood will still be moving, the digestive system will still be ready for food, the bones and muscles will still be ready for movement, the brain will still be ready for thought and memory and feeling. The whole living system will still be intact, still balanced, still alive. But for now, none of that matters. For now, there is only the dark and the quiet and the slow, soft drift toward sleep. The words are ending, and the night is waiting. Rest now. The body knows the way.